Chapter 1772. Reporting to the dean, they are in the laboratory. The student said with a respectful expression. Zhang Feng thanked him and walked to the laboratory. The laboratory was a place for everyone to do experiments. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun would usually be here. As soon as he entered, he saw the two of them lying on the table with glass bottles in their hands. He didn't know what they were doing. Ma Zhou, Hao Chujun, what are you doing? Zhang Feng asked curiously. The two of them turned their heads and looked at Zhang Feng with surprise. Benefactor, why are you here? After that, the two of them quickly put down the glass bottles in their hands and walked to Zhang Feng. I have something to tell you. Zhang Feng looked at the two of them and smiled faintly. I need you to develop a device for heat transfer. The two of them frowned and looked at each other in confusion. Benefactor, what do you mean? Can you explain? Ma Zhou scratched his head and didn't understand. Zhang Feng glanced at the two of them and explained patiently. Simply put, it is the flow of high-temperature gas or the gas composition changes and the interaction between the gas and the object. What kind of changes will happen when an object encounters a strong airflow? For example, why can a kite fly in the sky? It is affected by the airflow. Now I need you to make a device to transfer the heat to the other side. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were even more confused after hearing this. Zhang Feng didn't blame the two of them. Instead, he continued, actually, this isn't very difficult. Go and prepare an oil lamp, tweezers, wire, and paper. I will show you the experiment. When the two of them heard that there was an experiment to watch, they immediately ran off. After a while, the two of them brought the oil lamp, tweezers, wire, and paper over and placed them on the table. Zhang Feng took out a lighter and lit the oil lamp. Then he took out a cigarette from his waist and flicked it over the oil lamp. He took a deep breath and exhaled the smoke. He looked at the two of them and said, watch carefully. Cough cough, benefactor. Ma Zhou covered his mouth and nose and said with difficulty. Obviously, the smell of the cigarette choked him. Hao Chujun wasn't any better. He pursed his lips and nodded vigorously. Zhang Feng smiled and shook his head. He put the cigarette in his mouth and picked up the paper and wire with both hands. He put the wire through the paper, leaving a gap of 2 centimeters in the middle. After doing all this, he used a pair of tweezers to clamp one end of the wire and placed the other end on the oil lamp to heat it up. After a while, the iron wire turned black. Then, it slowly turned red until it was completely red. It's red. Benefactor, it's red. Ma Zhou exclaimed excitedly. For someone like him who was obsessed with academics, this was probably the only thing he was interested in. I know it's red. Zhang Feng was grinning with a cigarette in his mouth. His words were a little unclear. After saying that, he took the iron wire from the oil lamp and looked at Ma Zhou seriously. Feel the difference between the two ends of this iron wire. Touch it. Ma Zhou was a little confused. Although he was simple-minded, he wasn't stupid. Wouldn't he be scalded to death if he touched it? He shook his head to show his refusal. Seeing this, Zhang Feng showed a harmless smile. Listen to me. I'm doing this for your own good. You can only experience the results of the experiment by touching it. After experiencing it, you can remember it forever. Besides, this iron wire isn't very hot. Look, I'm also holding it, right? Ma Zhou glanced at Zhang Feng with a little suspicion. There was a huge struggle in his heart. In the end, he stretched out his hand. Hiss! A sudden pain hit him and he jerked his hand back. He looked back and saw a black mark on his hand. Ma Zhou glanced at Zhang Feng with disdain. What happened to not being hot? It was all a lie. Who would believe you? Zhang Feng didn't know these thoughts. He handed the iron wire to Hao Chujun. Do you want to touch it? Hao Chujun quickly waved his hand and took 2 steps back. I'll pass. Ma Zhou will remember the results of the experiment. Zhang Feng nodded with a faint smile and looked at Ma Zhou. Ma Zhou, in fact, I'm helping you. You see, in the future, when you see the scar on your hand, you will think of this experiment. Now, tell me how you feel about this experiment. Tell me? Ma Zhou rolled his eyes. However, on second thought, it seemed that there was nothing wrong. It was also a good thing that he could remember this experiment forever. He touched his hot hand, endured the pain, and said seriously, "Benefactor, I don't feel anything. I'm curious about one thing. Why don't you feel hot, but I feel hot?" Zhang Feng put down the tweezers, took a deep puff of the cigarette, and held it between his 2 fingers, revealing a meaningful smile. "This is why I let you touch it. The side you touched was roasted by fire, and the temperature was very high. According to the speed of iron's heat conduction, my side was already very hot, but the temperature would never be as high as yours. The same principle applies to the temperature. As long as one side produces a high temperature, it will quickly be transmitted to the other side. These 2 principles are the same. Do you understand now? Do you understand now?" The 2 nodded. Ma Zhou even forgot the pain in his fingers. Chapter 1773. Since you 2 have understood, then go and prepare some coal, iron basins, coarse cloth, live pigs, and thick ropes. I will teach you how to make a heat conduction device. When you are ready, wait for me at the sports ground." Zhang Feng smiled with satisfaction and waved to the 2. When he was about to turn and walk to the sports ground, he suddenly thought of something and turned to look at the 2. "By the way, the pig must be more than 100 pounds, or else it won't work." After that, he turned and walked to the sports ground. Live pigs? More than 100 pounds? Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were confused. They could understand other things, but what was with a live pig? Could it be that their benefactor wanted to eat pork? Then he didn't need to kill the pig on the sports ground. Although they didn't know what their benefactor wanted to do, they always thought that their benefactor was right. Their benefactor asked them to touch the iron wire for their own good. Hao Chujun didn't have the good fortune to remember this experiment forever. Ma Zhou glanced at Hao Chujun and then went to prepare the materials. Hao Chujun was like a monk. He didn't know what was going on, but he also went to prepare. After a while, the 2 came to the sports ground with the live pig. This scene attracted the attention of a group of students. They frowned and looked at them with puzzled expressions. They were just short of saying that they were a disgrace to the educated. "Benefactor, we have brought the materials. And this live pig, how do you want to kill it?" Ma Zhou put the rope and other things on the ground and looked at Zhang Feng, panting. "How to kill it?" Zhang Feng curled his lips. "So these 2 guys thought that he wanted to eat pork? Who said we want to kill it? Tie the pig up. We will use it for the experiment later." He rolled his eyes at the 2 of them. The 2 of them heard the dissatisfaction in Zhang Feng's tone. They quickly pulled the pig and tied it up. "You 2 put the coal into the iron basin, then ignite it and tie the rope." Zhang Feng glanced at the 2 of them and said with a smile. The 2 of them didn't suspect anything and quickly followed Zhang Feng's instructions. Ma Zhou had experience in burning coal before, so he did it quickly and ignited the fire in a moment. "Benefactor, the fire has been lit. What should we do now?" Ma Zhou squatted on the ground and looked up at Zhang Feng. "Now, hold up the cloth and place it above the brazier. Then hang the pig under the brazier and see if the cloth can rise." Zhang Feng looked up at the sky, a little worried. In fact, this was the only way he could think of right now. Without any other materials, he could only use coarse cloth and hemp rope as a substitute. Ma Zhou nodded his head and hurriedly tied the pig under the brazier. The coarse cloth had also been tied. Now, he was waiting for his benefactor to tell him to fly. The 2 of them held on to the rope, trying not to let it get burned by the fire. Unfortunately, the coarse cloth didn't move at all. It didn't even move. If it weren't for the 2 of them supporting it, it would have been burned away long ago. "Benefactor, when can this coarse cloth fly?" Ma Zhou held onto the rope and looked at Zhang Feng. He couldn't hold it in any longer. Ever since they had brought the pig over, many students had come over to watch. Now, more and more students had come over. Their gazes were as if they were looking at monkeys. "Wait here." Zhang Feng took out a cigarette from his waist and then looked up at the sky. In fact, he had no idea when this thing would be able to rise. It was just that there was no ball bag, hanging basket, heating device, or strengthened nylon. Otherwise, it could fly at any time. The 3 of them waited in the playground. After about half an hour, the students slowly dispersed. "Benefactor, I can't hold on any longer." Ma Zhou's face was constipated. He couldn't hold on any longer. His arms were already sore. "Wait a little longer." It will be done soon. Zhang Feng said impatiently. As soon as his voice fell, a gust of cold wind came. He was delighted. Once the wind blew, the hot air balloon would float easily. Hold up the coarse cloth quick. Zhang Feng looked back at the two of them and said in surprise. Oh! Ma Zhou quickly called Hao Chujun. Each of them pulled a corner and held up the coarse cloth. At this moment, a strong wind blew and directly lifted the coarse cloth. The hot air balloon began to float in the air. However, the hot air balloon was a little crooked as if it was about to fall down. The pig was also kicking its legs in the air, making the hot air balloon look more unstable. However, this did not affect Ma Zhou's curiosity. He ran to Zhang Feng's side and exclaimed happily like a child. It's flying, benefactor, it's flying. Zhang Feng took a deep puff of his cigarette and nodded, putting on the look of an elder. See, this is a piece of cake. You can make it in the future. As soon as he finished speaking, the hot air balloon fell to the ground with a bang. Even the pig let out a scream and fainted. How did it fall? Zhang Feng looked at the fallen hot air balloon and was a little confused. Although he knew it wouldn't fly for long, he didn't expect it to fall so soon. He threw away the cigarette butt in his hand. Let's go and see what's going on. After that, Zhang Feng strode toward the hot air balloon. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun followed closely behind. The fallen hot air balloon was not far away, about 10 meters away. The three of them quickly walked to it. Chapter 1774. Zhang Feng looked at the burnt rope and suddenly realized that it was burnt. It seemed that he had to find better experimental equipment. Just as he was thinking about a solution, Ma Zhou's voice came from behind him. Benefactor, the pig is dead. What should we do now? Zhang Feng glanced back. Sure enough, the pig was bleeding from its 7 orifices. It had fallen to its death. It has contributed to the research. You can give it to the cafeteria as its final contribution. Ma Zhou was surprised and said, Okay, I will give it to the cafeteria later. Who would not be happy to eat pork? If it was in the past, they would have thrown it away. However, after Zhang Feng, pork was very popular now. No one would refuse. Zhang Feng nodded and looked at the two of them. Both of you were present in the experiment today. Do you have any feelings? Or do you have any questions? Tell me now. I will go back to the academy later. Benefactor, I understand the experiment just now. It is to use the wind to blow this coarse cloth into the sky. However, this coarse cloth will not last long. Is there any other way? Ma Zhou scratched his head and expressed his doubts. If there is a way, why would I take you to do the experiment? I did it myself. Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Ma Zhou and said snappily, The reason why I'm taking you to do this experiment is that I hope you can find a better way or find something to replace this coarse cloth. Do you understand? Ma Zhou nodded sadly. What about you? Do you have any doubts? Zhang Feng looked at Hao Chujun and asked. Benefactor, I feel that airflow is unreliable. Coarse cloth is heavier. Once the wind stops, the coarse cloth will definitely fall. We should think of a way to create wind ourselves, or not use wind and let the coarse cloth float. Hao Chujun looked at Zhang Feng with a serious expression. He had to admit that this idea was very creative, but it was a little unrealistic. Well, this idea is good. I will leave this to you too. Zhang Feng nodded with a proud smile on his face. Hao Chujun's face was a little ugly. He was only proposing a point of view. There was no need to hand over the entire experiment to him. At this time, he only felt a chill on his back. He didn't know if it was a fear of the hot air balloon or an illusion. He turned around and saw Ma Zhou staring at him. He quickly turned his head and was about to refuse when Zhang Feng said, I'll leave this experiment to you too. Don't let me down. Also, remember to use pigs for the experiment. Don't use living people. This facility isn't complete yet. People might die. The two nodded reluctantly. It wasn't that they didn't want to do this experiment, but this experiment was too difficult. Not only did they need a live pig for an experiment, but they also had to lift this heavy rope. How were they going to do this? Until now, their arms were still sore, but now that their benefactor had spoken, they had to accept it even if they didn't want to. It seemed that they could only ask the students of the academy for help. Zhang Feng didn't care about their thoughts. He waved his hand casually. You two pack up and deal with this pig. Find a chance to continue the experiment. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. After that, he left without looking back, leaving the two helpless people behind. How do we do this? My arms are still sore. Ma Zhou looked at Hao Chujun and shook his arms. I'm sore too. Hao Chujun was a little dissatisfied. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, how could our benefactor leave such a huge experiment to us? How long do we have to do this damn experiment? Ma Zhou pinched his sore arms and complained. How can you blame me? It's obvious that our benefactor wants to leave the experiment to us. It's useless to refuse. Hao Chujun rolled his eyes at Ma Zhou. He was also lazy just now and his arms were sore. Find someone to move it. I can't move it anyway. Ma Zhou curled his lips and turned to leave. In fact, he had already seen that his benefactor wanted to leave the experiment to him. He couldn't refuse even if he wanted to. Now he could only concentrate on the experiment. The two left one after another. In less than a moment, a large group of students came over. They were all called by Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun to move the equipment. Their arms were sore and they could only do manual labor. What's this? You don't understand. Just now I saw the dean and Mr. Ma sitting on this coarse cloth and directly ascending to heaven. Ah, this thing can ascend to heaven? Everyone surrounded the coarse cloth like curious babies and kept talking. A leading man stepped forward and picked up a roll of coarse cloth. He looked at the others and said, You said the dean used this thing to ascend to heaven? His name was Jin Kai, Ma Zhou's disciple. He was usually the diligent type. Yes, I saw the dean use a coarse cloth to tie a hemp rope. The hemp rope was connected to the brazier below. When the wind blew, he directly ascended to heaven. A man with greasy hair and a powdered face answered. His name was Ping Shui. He usually liked to play basketball and go out to play. Today, when he saw the new thing like the hot air balloon, he suddenly felt that the basketball in his hand was not so good. When he heard that they were going to move things, he was the first to run over. Chapter 1775. Since this thing is so powerful, why don't we give it a try? Peng Shui picked up a piece of burned hemp rope and kept playing with it in his hand. No, we are here to move things. What if the dean and our teacher know that we are messing with their experimental equipment? Jin Kai spread out his arms to stop the crowd with a reluctant look. He knew the consequences of Ma Zhou's anger and dared not cross the line. Don't worry, we won't destroy the dean and his teacher's things. We just want to take a look. Peng Shui said with a smile and then winked at the crowd around him. Everyone understood and clustered around Jin Kai, laughing heartily. Senior brother Jin, we just want to take a look. It doesn't matter. That's right, senior brother Jin. Even if we had two guts, we wouldn't dare to break the dean's things. Senior brother Jin, look, the dean just got this novel thing. Aren't you curious at all? Anyway, it is damaged now. Why don't we also experiment with it? Maybe there will be some results. Why don't you go to Mr. Ma and ask for credit? Everyone chimed in one after another, and what they said was quite reasonable, which made Jin Kai a little shaken. Jin Kai looked back at the coarse cloth and was a little hesitant. In fact, he also wanted to see what this thing was at first. But he was afraid that the dean and his teacher would blame him, so he didn't move and kept persuading his classmates. Now, all his classmates wanted to see it, and he couldn't stop them. Otherwise, he would be in a bad situation. Well, let's see it together, but we can't damage the dean's experimental equipment. Jin Kai said carefully to everyone. Hearing this, everyone jumped up and said that their senior brother was righteous. Usually, Jin Kai was liked by Ma Zhou, so no one dared to embarrass him. In such a situation, they could only persuade him. Fortunately, the other party was a blockhead, and he was coaxed with a few words. This time was no exception. Everyone squatted beside the experimental equipment and formed a circle. Senior brother, tell us, how can we make this coarse cloth fly? Look at the operation of our teacher. Just tie the hemp rope to the coarse cloth, light the fire in the brazier, and hang the pig. Then it will fly. But the pig is already dead. What should we do? This sentence made everyone's morale drop. They all turned their heads to look at the dead pig that was bleeding from its 7 orifices, their faces full of unwillingness. Yes, the pig was already dead. What was there to play with? Even if the other experimental equipment was intact, there was no way to continue. At this moment, that guy had a flash of inspiration and said, "Pigs are alive, and so are humans. Without pigs, we can use humans." This sentence instantly ignited the hope in everyone's hearts, and they all turned their heads to look in the direction of the voice. The one who spoke had a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks, looking very slippery. His name was Pai Ji, nicknamed Pai Ho. He was usually an expert at coming up with bad ideas, and this time was no exception. Pihu is right. Since there are no pigs, we'll have to use humans. Pihu, you'll do it later. Peng Shui looked at Pihu, not allowing any room for discussion. He was used to being a tyrant in school. He didn't dare to bully people like Jin Kai, but people like Pihu were still easy to deal with. I just came up with an idea. You don't have to be like this. Pihu was a little unhappy. Although he didn't know the use of this experiment, looking at the pig, he knew that it wouldn't end well. Since this idea came from you, you should contribute a little to the experiment. Later we'll catch you below. Don't worry. Peng Shui went forward and patted Pihu's shoulder to make him feel at ease. Pihu lowered his head, and his eyes were a little evasive. After a while, he slowly said, "All right then." However, Jin Kai was a little worried. He looked at Peng Shui and probed, "Peng Shui, it's not good to let Pai Ji go up. If there's any danger, how are we going to explain it to Master?" He didn't call him by his nickname because he felt that it wasn't respectful. Peng Shui smiled and walked to Jin Kai's side. He put his hand on the latter's shoulder and said earnestly, "Senior brother, you're worrying too much. Pihu is so thin, how can there be any danger? Besides, we'll catch him below. Nothing will happen." Jin Kai looked at Pihu, wanting to see something from him. Unfortunately, he couldn't see anything. Pihu looked like he was willing to do it. It was unknown whether he was willing or coerced. "All right then. Everyone quickly go and prepare. Otherwise, Master will scold us when he sees us." Peng Shui was delighted and hurriedly called out to everyone, "Everyone quickly go and prepare. Replace the burned hemp rope with new ones. Also check the coarse cloth and bring some coal over." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly went to prepare the materials. Only Peng Shui, Jin Kai, and Pihu were left. Not long after, everyone came back one after another. Not only did they bring back the hemp rope, they also brought back other materials, such as iron wire. This made Jin Kai a little confused. "What did you bring iron wire for?" The dean used rope for his experiment. Chapter 1776. That person scratched his head and said awkwardly, "We were afraid that Pihu would break free from the rope, so we took the iron wire." Hearing this, Pihu's face immediately darkened. "Mother Ker, do you really think I'm a pig? Using iron wire to tie him up?" At that time, he wouldn't even be able to run. No, he couldn't do this job. Just as he was about to speak, a pair of eyes stared at him. It was Peng Shui. Peng Shui glared at him fiercely, causing him to take a step back and swallow the words he was about to say. At this time, Jin Kai's voice sounded again. He looked at Peng Shui. "Peng Shui, it's not good to use iron wire." Of course I know that." Peng Shui smiled and patted Jin Kai's shoulder. "Of course we'll use hemp rope. How can we use iron wire?" With that, he glanced at the guy holding the iron wire. Damn, he really wanted to strangle him to death. Without waiting for others to speak, he continued, "Since everything is ready, let's get ready to start. Tie Pihu up." Hearing this, everyone picked up the rope and walked towards Pihu. Pihu actually resisted in his heart, but due to Peng Shui's abuse of power, he could only choose to submit. Everyone moved quickly and tied Pihu up in a short while, as if they were very experienced in this field. "Come, everyone hold up the coarse cloth. Those who start the fire, start the fire. Those who hang the rope, hang the rope." Peng Shui glanced at everyone and gave the order. For some reason, at this moment, everyone suddenly became excited. It was not like the excitement of seeing the equipment, but the excitement of hearing the command. Even Peng Shui, who was usually serious, joined in. They didn't have much experience in starting a fire. Most of them were young masters of rich families, or children of high officials. How would they know how to start a fire? They all gathered around the brazier, not knowing how to use the fire starter. It was eldest senior brother Jin Kai who taught them how to start a fire. There was no other way. After following Ma Zhou, he had to learn everything. After half a day, the fire was finally started. Everyone's faces were black and blue. These were the traces left behind by the coal. The most serious was Jin Kai. His face was completely black. Peng Shui was in the middle of arranging coarse cloth with the others. He inadvertently glanced back and saw Jin Kai. He couldn't help but laugh. Eldest senior brother, what's with your face? Jin Kai still hadn't noticed, so he asked in confusion, what's wrong with my face? As he spoke, he even used his hand to wipe his face. With this wipe, his entire face turned black. Other than his teeth, which were a little white, no other color could be seen. Their conversation also attracted the attention of the other students. Everyone looked at Jin Kai and the people around him and immediately burst into laughter. Ha, eldest senior brother, your face? No, I can't help it. Ha, who would have thought that a fire would end up like this? Ha. Everyone pointed at Jin Kai and the others, laughing so hard that they were rocking back and forth. Some of them were even lying on the ground laughing. It was no wonder that everyone was laughing at them. Jin Kai and the others looked too funny. They were all like monkeys. Other than their teeth and necks, their faces were all black. A few of them were slightly better. Their faces were full of bumps and bumps, as if they were dressed for an opera. After being laughed at by the crowd, they finally reacted. They looked at each other and their faces instantly turned ugly. No, the others didn't know why their faces turned ugly. It should be because their eyes were embarrassed. They looked at everyone awkwardly, especially Jin Kai. As the eldest senior brother, he couldn't wait to find a hole to hide in and never come out again. Seeing Jin Kai's awkwardness, Peng Shui hurriedly tried to smooth things over. He coughed twice, clenched his right hand into a fist and put it to his mouth. He couldn't help but smile. Don't laugh. After saying that, everyone's laughter gradually stopped. The few people on the ground also got up. However, they imitated Peng Shui and put their right hand to their mouth. From time to time, they would smile as if they hadn't had enough. Seeing this, Peng Shui put down his right hand and deliberately coughed twice. He glanced at everyone. Everyone, don't laugh. Let's get down to business. Now that eldest senior brother has helped us start the fire, let's set up the monkeys and hold up the coarse cloth. In fact, he was also trying hard not to laugh. Although he also wanted to laugh, once he laughed, eldest senior brother would be angry and no one would be the scapegoat. However, Jin Kai didn't know this. He thought that Peng Shui had helped him out and gave Peng Shui a grateful look. Everyone started to get busy again. They held up the coarse cloth. Piho was also tied under the brazier, ready to fly at any time. Jin Kai was a little embarrassed. He walked to Peng Shui and smiled. Thank you, Peng Shui. You're welcome, senior brother. Peng Shui waved his hand casually, as if he didn't care. Then, he looked at the busy people and seemed to have noticed something. Slow down, be careful not to strangle Pihu to death. Peng Shui, look, it's almost done. I'll take my leave first. Jin Kai glanced at everyone, his eyes somewhat evasive. Chapter 1777. Hearing this, Peng Shui quivered and hurriedly shifted his gaze back. He pulled Jin Kai's arm and said, Senior brother, you can't leave. We're only halfway through. Without you, we can't do anything. He knew that Jin Kai was embarrassed and wanted to find a place to wash the coal off his face. However, he couldn't let him leave now. Otherwise, who would be the scapegoat when his teacher came? But, my face. Jin Kai lowered his head awkwardly. He wanted to say something but stopped. It's okay, senior brother. Peng Shui stepped forward and grabbed Jin Kai's shoulder. He was afraid that the other party would run away. Peng Shui said earnestly, You are making a sacrifice for the research. It's glorious. Even if others see you, it's nothing. Besides, if you leave now, you won't be able to see the results of the experiment. Don't blame me if you regret it. It had to be said that Peng Shui was very good at tricking people. Jin Kai hesitated after hearing those words. If he really left, he wouldn't be able to see the results. What was a little coal? What was being laughed at? These couldn't compare to the results at all. Okay, then I won't leave. Let's start the experiment. Jin Kai nodded heavily, as if he had made a big decision in his heart. That's right. Come, let's start. Peng Shui patted Jin Kai's shoulder and smiled. Let's go, senior brother. Let's do the experiment. After saying that, he pulled Jin Kai to the side of everyone, not caring if he was willing or not. Coarse cloth, hemp rope, brazier, and other things were all prepared. Even Pihu was tied up. He could only speak through his mouth. This wasn't torture. They needed the hemp rope as a guide. Otherwise, if Pihu stomped, the cloth wouldn't be able to withstand it. Another reason was because they saw how the Dean and Ma Zhou worked. They wanted to try it. Everyone, hold up the cloth and hold the hemp rope. Get ready. Peng Shui glanced at everyone and began to give orders. He then looked at Pihu. Pihu, you get ready too. We're going to ascend soon. This is your honor. Pihu curled his lips, expressing that he didn't want such an honor. However, he didn't dare to say it out loud. Everyone began to prepare. Those who were pulling the rope and those who were holding the cloth were holding it up. Everything was ready except for one thing. Peng Shui put his hand on his forehead and glanced at the sky. He muttered to himself, when will the wind start? I don't know. Let's wait and see. Jin Kai imitated Peng Shui and placed his palm on his forehead, looking at the gloomy sky. Peng Shui nodded and turned to look at everyone. Everyone, hold on a little longer. The wind is about to pick up. When the wind picks up, we will be able to see the results of the experiment. After he finished speaking, he half squatted on the ground and took out a cigarette from his waist. He took out a lighter and slowly lit it up before taking a puff. Everyone could only listen to him. They held the hemp rope with both hands and waited for the wind to arrive. As for Pihu, he was in a bit of a bad state. Although he wasn't tied up with iron wire, the hemp rope was still choking him. He moved closer to the person beside him with a fawning look on his face. Hey, Xiao Hao, loosen it for me. This thing is making me uncomfortable. I need to pee. The man called Xiao Hao took 2 steps back. His hands were still tightly holding onto the hemp rope. He said timidly, Pihu, don't make things difficult for me. Don't you know Peng Shui? His father is a second-rank official. If you offend him, you won't be able to survive in the academy. You should just wait for your ascension. Hearing this, Pihu's face immediately darkened. He glared at Xiao Hao and scolded, You bastard! Lao Tzu even gave you a cigarette. Now you won't even loosen the rope for Lao Tzu? After saying that, he gave Xiao Hao a hard kick before he stopped. The latter staggered and almost fell. Xiao Hao slowly stood up. He wasn't angry. Instead, he took out a cigarette from his waist and placed it next to Pihu's mouth. He had a fawning look on his face. Brother Pihu, don't be angry. At most, I'll give you another cigarette. After he finished speaking, he took out a lighter and lit it for Pihu. Pihu didn't care about what happened just now. He put the cigarette in his mouth and took a deep puff. I'll tell, halfway through his words, a gust of wind suddenly blew. The coarse cloth was lifted up, bulging like a rubber ball, shooting straight up into the sky. As for Pihu, his entire body was lifted up, his face revealing a pained expression. His mouth loosened, and the cigarette immediately fell. As luck would have it, the cigarette just happened to fall onto his pants. Senior brother, save me. Senior brothers, save me. I don't want to play anymore. Pihu had a sullen face as he shouted towards everyone in the sky. Peng Shui was still half squatting on the ground smoking. When he heard someone shouting for him, he listened carefully. Mother asterisk Kerr, this was Pihu's voice. This guy was flying? He couldn't care less. He threw away the cigarette in his hand and suddenly stood up. He looked towards the direction of Pihu's voice. As expected, the coarse cloth was flying in the air. The fire in the brazier wasn't extinguished. Most importantly, Pihu was also flying. Although his face was a bit ugly, it didn't affect anything. Great, the experiment finally succeeded. Chapter 1778. Peng Shui looked at the sky with satisfaction, overjoyed. Soon after, he seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly asked Pihu, Pihu, how is it? How does it feel to fly? Although his voice was loud, due to the wind resistance, it sounded different in Pihu's ears. Pihu put his palm to his ear, trying to receive as much information as possible. Ah? You're asking me if it feels good? Good, your sister, Peng Shui. Lao Tzu won't let you go when he comes down. Although he knew that Peng Shui's father was a second-rank official, he still decided to teach him a lesson. If it weren't for this guy, would he be in such a sorry state? Just as he was calculating how to teach Peng Shui a lesson, a sudden pain came from his leg. He quickly lowered his head, startled. It was the cigarette but from before. He was smoking below when a gust of wind suddenly blew, bringing him up into the sky. At that time, the cigarette hadn't been thrown away, so he wanted to take a few more puffs. However, just as he was talking, his mouth loosened, and the cigarette fell out, burning a large hole in his pants. Most importantly, the fire hadn't been extinguished yet, and was growing bigger and bigger. Peng Shui, you bastard, put me down quickly. Lao Tzu is going to be burned to death. Pihu's eyes were wide open, his face red. He looked at the fire in his pants as he shouted towards the ground. However, although his voice was loud, it didn't reach the ground at all. Peng Shui frowned, glancing at Jin Kai, who was taking notes. Senior brother, didn't you hear what Pihu said? Jin Kai was in the middle of his research, so he didn't care about this nonsense. He shook his head, indicating that he didn't know, and continued to take notes, looking like a good student. Peng Shui shook his head, looking at the surrounding crowd. Did you guys hear what Pihu said? Oh, Pihu said he was quite happy. No, look at Pihu's expression. He clearly wants to come down. Look, why is there a ball of fire on Pihu's leg? That's the fire from the brazier, not Pihu's. How can a person catch fire out of nowhere, unless Pihu is an immortal? Stop arguing. Pihu clearly looks like he's enjoying himself. Otherwise, why would he shout so loudly? He's clearly showing off. Next time, I want to go to heaven too. Everyone discussed animatedly. In any case, none of them understood what Frisky Monkey was saying. In the end, they came to the conclusion that Pihu was showing off. He was showing off that he could ascend to the heavens and that others didn't have this fortune. This conclusion made everyone somewhat regretful. They regretted that they had not said it earlier. Then, wouldn't they have been able to ascend to the heavens? How could it be Pippi's turn? There were even a few who beat their chests and stamped their feet, swearing that they would be the first to ascend the next time. This scene made Peng Shui a little confused. Among all of them, he could be considered to be the cleverest. Just now, he had seen through Pihu's rotten idea. Otherwise, why would the dean and the others use live pigs for experiments? However, Pihu's reaction didn't seem to be the same. Pihu seemed to be very happy in the sky and even felt like he was floating in the air. Damn it. Next time, Lao Tzu would also go to heaven. No one would be able to snatch it from him. Jin Kai also looked at Pihu enviously. He put down the notebook in his hand and rested his chin on his hands, imagining how he would feel the next time he ascended to the heavens. However, they didn't know how uncomfortable Pihu was in the sky. At this moment, the fire had already reached his thighs and his throat was about to split. This group of bastards still thought that he was showing off. Pihu lowered his head dejectedly. It was as if a bottle of mixed feelings had been knocked over in his heart. However, there was only sourness, bitterness, and spiciness left. If he had resolutely opposed ascending to the heavens, perhaps he wouldn't have suffered such a calamity. Just as he was feeling helpless, another gust of wind blew. The coarse cloth fluttered in the air and the fire in the brazier began to sway as if it would be extinguished at any moment. The wind grew stronger and stronger, directly blowing the coarse cloth away. Pihu was also swaying in the air. He was tied up by the rope and couldn't move. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so passive. On the ground, when everyone saw Pihu being blown away by the wind, they couldn't help but feel jealous. What's so great about that? Isn't it just ascending to the heavens? Yeah, this time Lao Tzu gave it to you. Next time, Lao Tzu will be the first to ascend to the heavens. Just show off for a while and it's over. Still fucking showing off here, do you really think we're fools? Everyone looked at Pihu with disdain. Their words were full of disdain, but they were jealous in their hearts. Their way of thinking was very strange. They didn't want to admit it, but they were jealous in their hearts and wished that they were Pihu. Peng Shui and Jin Kai were the same. However, the two of them didn't show it. They only quietly watched, but their hearts were slowly filled with envy. At this time, Jin Kai seemed to have discovered something and suddenly exclaimed, "What's going on? Why is Pihu hanging on the tree?" Once these words came out, everyone seemed to have discovered a new continent. Even those who had shifted their gazes away instantly looked towards Pihu's direction. Sure enough, Pihu and the coarse cloth were both hanging on the tree in a sorry state. Fortunately, the brazier was extinguished. Otherwise, the tree would have been burned. Chapter 1779. It turned out that when the wind blew, Pihu had been blown onto a tree branch. Because he couldn't move, he was hung on the branch. Luckily, the tree was big enough to support coarse cloth. Moreover, the fire on his pants had already been extinguished. Otherwise, he would have been burned to death. However, he wasn't any better. The fire had burned through his pants, immediately exposing his buttocks. There were still many burn marks on his legs. Some were green, some were red, and the most serious ones already had blisters. Pihu moved his body with difficulty. Looking at everyone, he roared, "You bastards, why aren't you coming to save Lao Tzu?" Because it was far away, when it reached everyone's ears, they were confused. However, they roughly understood what Pihu was saying. It was nothing more than saving a life. Jin Kai threw down the notebook in his hand and ran towards the tree. Peng Shui also hurriedly followed behind. If something really happened, the two of them wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. After all, they were the leaders. Right now, they didn't dare to be careless. Seeing their senior brother run over, the others didn't dare to delay. They all rushed over. The tree was still some distance away from everyone. Fortunately, they were still worried about coarse cloth and Pihu, so they didn't dare to stop. After about an incense stick's worth of time, they finally arrived under the tree. However, everyone was already panting from exhaustion. Looking at everyone under the tree, the anger in Pihu's heart involuntarily rose. "You bastards, Lao Tzu is about to die because of you. Hurry up and save Lao Tzu. Otherwise, Lao Tzu will definitely report you to the dean." He mercilessly scolded, not caring about everyone's face. Peng Shui's face was somewhat unsightly. He panted heavily, his face red. Both hands on his knees, he raised his head. "Pihu, you mother****. Lao Tzu didn't force you to go to heaven. It was you who wanted to play. Why are you blaming Lao Tzu now? Wanted to play?" Pihu's eyes widened. If he wasn't tied up right now, he would definitely give this guy a good beating. "You bastard, it was you who threatened Lao Tzu. Now it's Lao Tzu who wanted to play?" Pihu's mouth was unforgiving as he glared and scolded. Hearing this, Peng Shui was immediately enraged. He stood up and pointed at Pihu, cursing, "You mother****, you still dare to curse Lao Tzu. I'm giving you face, or do you want to die?" After saying that, he prepared to climb up the tree and beat up Naughty Monkey. Seeing that his posture was not right, the people beside him hurriedly stopped him. Pihu immediately felt a bit weak. He timidly said, "I won't scold you anymore. Can you find someone to put me down first? Let you go?" Peng Shui snorted coldly and leaned against the tree, looking as if it had nothing to do with him. Seeing this, Jin Kai, who was beside him, hurriedly advised, "Peng Shui, it's better to find someone to put Pai Ji down. Otherwise, if something happens, we won't be able to explain it to the dean and teacher. You know their temper." Hearing this, Peng Shui frowned, obviously thinking about something. After a while, he turned to look at Pihu with a teasing smile on his face. "Pihu, it's not impossible to let Lao Tzu put you down, but you'll have to pour night incense for Lao Tzu every night." "Peng Shui, this isn't too good." Jin Kai looked at Peng Shui, looking like a good guy. "Senior brother, you don't understand. This is to teach this guy a lesson. Who asked him to curse me just now?" Peng Shui patted Jin Kai's shoulder, indicating that it was fine. Then, he looked at Pihu, his teasing smile even more obvious. "Pihu, how about it? If you agree, Lao Tzu will put you down right now." Pihu's brows were almost knitted together. His expression was ugly and he wanted to say something but stopped. Peng Shui's request was too polite. However, if he did not agree, based on his prestige, the other students would not dare to put him down. Could it be that he had to stay here forever? He was a bit hesitant. After a while, he seemed to have made a decision. Alright, I agree. Hurry up. Peng Shuai nodded in satisfaction. He glanced at Little Hao behind him and ordered, Little Hao, you go up. Me? Little Hao exclaimed and pointed at himself. His expression was a bit ugly. Can you let someone else go? I'm afraid of heights. Stop talking nonsense. Brother Peng asked you to go, so go. A student behind pushed Little Hao, his words sharp. Little Hao slowly stood out from the crowd and looked at Peng Shuai timidly. Seeing that the latter was unmoved, he then obediently prepared to climb up the tree. Little Hao, hurry up. Lao Tzu can't take it anymore. Pihu lowered his head, looked at Little Hao, and kept urging him. Hearing that, Little Hao quickened his pace. Using both his hands and feet, he worked hard to climb up. Everyone formed a circle under the tree, looking up at Little Hao. This scene was like watching a monkey. At this moment, a scolding voice came from not far away. What are you guys doing? Hearing that, Peng Shuai was enraged. Who the hell was ruining Lao Tzu's fun? Just as he was about to curse, he turned around and saw Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun staring at him. Instantly, he lost his previous elegance and smiled softly. Respected teachers, why are you here? Chapter 1780. Everyone turned around. When they saw Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun, they quickly lowered their heads like children who had done something wrong. Xiao Hao, who was on the tree, was also attracted by the sound. He turned his head and was so shocked that he couldn't help but let go of his hands. He immediately fell on his butt. Ouch, my butt! Xiao Hao's eyes were half closed. His face was a little ferocious. He touched his butt and screamed in pain. His screams attracted Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun's attention. They pushed the people in front of them and said, Move aside. What happened inside? No one dared to disobey and made way for the two of them. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun walked under the tree and saw Xiao Hao lying on the ground and screaming. What's going on? Ma Zhou pointed at Xiao Hao and questioned the crowd. He had asked this group of brats to move the equipment. After waiting for a long time, not only did the equipment not return, but the people were also gone. So, he and Hao Chujun decided to come out and look for them. Then they saw this scene. Jin Kai walked out from the crowd and said respectfully, Teacher, wait. Ma Zhou reached out and interrupted him. He walked around Jin Kai twice and touched his chin with his palm. He was puzzled and asked, Why don't I remember having a disciple like you? What's your name? Hao Chujun nodded and echoed, That's right. We don't have a disciple as black as you. Teacher, I'm Jin Kai. Jin Kai pointed at himself. After that, he used his hand to rub his face hard, trying to erase the traces on his face. Jin Kai? Ma Zhou widened his eyes in disbelief. Because in his impression, Jin Kai was a fair and clean man. How did he become so black? He looked as if he had just come back from digging coal. You said you're Jin Kai? Hao Chujun pointed at Jin Kai. His eyes were full of disbelief, but the latter kept nodding. This made his confidence waver. Since you said you're Jin Kai, prove it. They all know. Jin Kai pointed at the crowd and hurriedly proved himself. Then he pointed at the students who started the fire with him. Just now my face was black because of the fire. These people are the same. Everyone nodded and admitted that Jin Kai was telling the truth. Seeing this, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun temporarily admitted that the black-faced man was Jin Kai. Ma Zhou didn't have the time to care so much. He casually waved his hand and said, All right, tell me what's going on now. Why did you take so long to get the equipment? And they're all crowding around the tree? Jin Kai lowered his head like a child who had done something wrong. Master, it's like this. At first, there was no problem with us taking the experimental equipment, but Peng Shuai said he wanted to do an experiment, so we used the materials you left behind for the experiment. We even tied Pai Ji to it. What? You dare to experiment on living people? Ma Zhou's eyes widened, and his body trembled as he pointed at the crowd. At first, he didn't hear anything in the beginning, but the more he listened, the more he felt something was wrong. Using experimental equipment for experiments? Just how much guts did he have? Lao Tzu had just used the experimental equipment left behind by their mentor, and now it was being used by these bastards again? And most importantly, these guys actually dared to experiment on living people? One had to know that before his teacher left, he had repeatedly warned him not to use living people for experiments. These bastards. Where's Pai Ji now? Hao Chu-jun panted heavily, and his eyes were red as he said fiercely. He was also very angry, and now he wanted to give these guys a good beating. He asked this guy to take something, but not only did he not take it back, but he also caused a lot of trouble. Jin Kai lowered his head and pointed at the tree branch. Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun looked at each other, a little confused, but they still looked in the direction Jin Kai pointed. In the end, they saw Pai Ji hanging on the tree branch, panting heavily, as if he was dying. Ma Zhou's body trembled even more. He tried hard to turn around, and his eyes were red as he stared at the crowd. Why did you put Pai Ji on the tree? Seeing this, Hao Chu-jun quickly helped Ma Zhou up and glared at the crowd. Master, we didn't do it. It was the wind. Jin Kai lowered his head and said timidly, I don't care who put Pai Ji on the tree. Put him down now. Hao Chu-jun's eyes were red as he pointed at the crowd and shouted angrily. Hearing this, Peng Shui quickly used his elbow to poke a man beside him, indicating for him to go up the tree and save Pai Ji. The man stole a glance at Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun, but he didn't waste any time. He knew that he couldn't bear the pressure from the two teachers. He quickly walked to the bottom of the tree and used both his hands and feet to climb up the tree in no time. At this moment, Pai Ji was panting on the tree branch. His eyes were half closed as if he was asleep, but he knew that was not the case. He should have fainted. Pai Ji, wake up. He gently pushed Pai Ji, trying to wake him up. Pai Ji shook his dizzy head and slowly woke up. His face instantly turned ugly as he stared at the person who came. Shui Huan, you bastard! You still know how to save Lao Tzu? Do you want to see Lao Tzu die before you are satisfied? Chapter 1781. Shui Huan lowered his head, feeling wronged, and said softly, Pew, lower your voice. Master and the others are watching below. Hearing this, Pihu glanced below the tree and saw Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun glaring at him. He quivered in fright and quickly shut his mouth. Pihu, don't move. I'll save you now. Shui Huan whispered in Pihu's ear, and then began to untie the ropes on the latter's body. It was unknown which bastard tied the ropes, but every one of them was tied to the flesh. Shui Huan finally untied the ropes after using all his strength. In the end, Pihu seemed to be a bit impatient. Once the ropes were released, he struggled to break free. The tree branch was suddenly broken, and he fell heavily to the ground. My waist? Pihu was half lying on the ground with his hands on his waist. Sweat poured down his forehead like rain, and his expression was sinister. Seeing this, Ma Zhou quickly went up, squatted down, and asked with concern, Pai Ji, how are you? However, Pihu seemed to not have heard him, and was still moaning on the ground. This made Ma Zhou very anxious. He turned around and glanced at the dazed crowd, and angrily rebuked, What are you guys still standing there for? Hurry up and send Pai Ji to the infirmary. Everyone suddenly understood, and all of them rushed up, preparing to take Pihu away. Most of them wanted to escape punishment, because they knew that after today's incident, their masters would not let them go. Now was the best time to escape. However, what they could think of, Ma Zhou could naturally think of as well. His face was gloomy and he coldly snorted, Wait, 2 people are enough. Peng Shui and Jin Kai stay. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other embarrassedly. Peng Shui passed the leather monkey in his hand to the other students, and Jin Kai also retracted his step. They all turned around and lined up in a row, quietly waiting for the 2 teachers to reprimand them. You guys are really good. Which bastard came up with this rotten idea? Ma Zhou pointed at everyone, and his face became the color of pig liver. It seemed that he was quite angry. Everyone lowered their heads and looked at each other. In the end, they all looked at Peng Shui. Peng Shui looked at Jin Kai because he had planned to make Jin Kai the scapegoat from the very beginning. There was no other reason than Jin Kai was Ma Zhou's favorite disciple. Seeing this, Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun more or less understood that this matter should be instigated by Peng Shui and Jin Kai. Peng Shui could still understand. His father was a second-rank official in the imperial court, so it was not strange for him to lead such a matter. However, Jin Kai was a famous student in the academy. He was excellent in both moral and academic performance. Ma Zhou couldn't believe it, but he didn't have any evidence, so he continued to berate, "What do you mean by this? Who is the mastermind?" As he spoke, he intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Peng Shuai, hoping that Peng Shuai would take the initiative to admit it so that the other students would not be implicated. In the end, this guy was still stubborn. He kept looking at Jin Kai as if to say that this was all done by Jin Kai and had nothing to do with him. The others also kept quiet. They all knew that the mastermind was Peng Shuai, and everyone was implicated. However, his father was a second-rank official, so who would dare to report him? Seeing that there was no effect, Hao Chujun became impatient. He walked in front of Jin Kai and said earnestly, "Jin Kai, you have always been the disciple that we valued the most. Now that something like this has happened, you tell us, who is the instigator? Also, did you participate in it?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's eyes turned to Jin Kai, afraid that he would say their names. Especially Peng Shuai, he clenched his fists, and his eyes were about to burst into flames. He stared at Jin Kai, hoping that this guy would not report him. Jin Kai was actually in a difficult position. If he reported Peng Shuai, his father was a second-rank official. Not only would his career be difficult, but it would also be difficult for him to stay in the academy. If he didn't report him, his teachers would definitely be disappointed in him. He glanced at everyone who was looking at him with hopeful gazes, and then looked at Peng Shuai. He was very conflicted, but in the end, he made up his mind. He took a step forward and said seriously, "My two teachers, everyone here is the mastermind behind this matter, and they are all responsible, including myself. Please punish me." Hearing this, everyone's eyes widened as they looked at Jin Kai, because they had not expected him to say this. Those students who did not participate in the mastermind had already cursed Jin Kai's 18 generations of ancestors in their hearts. They were only following Peng Shuai's instructions, so how did this guy become the mastermind? And Peng Shuai could be said to be the one who benefited the most. Not only was he the mastermind behind the entire matter, he had also threatened Pihu, so he should receive the heaviest punishment. In the end, when it came out of Jin Kai's mouth, it was as if he had been erased just like everyone else. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun were a little dumbfounded. They had thought that Jin Kai would report Peng Shuai and explain everything clearly. Who would have thought that not only did this guy not report anyone, he even took responsibility for himself? Chapter 1782. Motherf **Ker, was this supposed to be fair? Fair and impartial? Or was this guy involved from the beginning? Was his appearance as a good student a disguise? Jin Kai, are you sure you are the mastermind in this matter? Ma Zhou looked at Jin Kai suspiciously. He could not believe that he had misjudged him. How could a good student make such a mistake? Jin Kai glanced at the crowd and nodded heavily, indicating that he was right. Seeing this, Ma Zhou could not suppress the anger in his heart. He pointed at Jin Kai and scolded, "You bastard, to think that we valued you so much. Now you almost killed someone. What should we do with you?" "Yes, we thought this matter had nothing to do with you. In the end, Sai, you really let us down." Seeing that everything was confirmed, Hao Chujun rushed forward and pointed at Jin Kai's nose and scolded him. Jin Kai was like a wrong child. He lowered his head and remained silent, listening to the teachings of his two respected teachers. The crowd looked at Jin Kai gloatingly. They covered their mouths and laughed. Jin Kai had just reported them, and now he was being scolded by his two respected teachers. It would be strange if they were not happy. There were even a few who laughed out loud. Ma Zhou seemed to have heard something and turned around abruptly. In the end, he saw those fellows giggling. He was instantly enraged. "Motherf **Ker, I am reprimanding my disciple and you still dare to laugh?" He stared at the crowd and spat, "You bastards still have the face to laugh? If it were not for you, would Pai Ji be hanging on the tree? If it were not for you, would the director's experimental equipment be damaged? That's right, I really don't know where you get the face to laugh at others. Do you think you can act like a tyrant just because your family is rich? Let me tell you, in the academy, You are nothing. Hao Chujun also turned around and pointed at the crowd. His words were merciless. Everyone knew the severity of the matter. They lowered their heads tightly and did not dare to speak. After about the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the two of them were almost done scolding. They glanced at the crowd and said impatiently, "Today, go fill the canteen with water, then take the dung to water the flowers and plants. Finally, find a place to buy the damaged experimental equipment. If these 3 tasks are not completed, you are not allowed to eat today." As his voice fell, everyone's expression became more and more unsightly. They were all pampered young masters. When had they ever done such menial work? Carrying water? Carrying dung? He still had to buy experimental equipment? Who the hell knew where these experimental equipment were sold? "Teachers, can you finish it tomorrow?" Peng Shui smiled until his face was full of wrinkles. He put on a fawning look. His family was rich. If he went out and called a servant over today, he wouldn't have to do it himself tomorrow. Just thinking about it made him happy. "I see." Ma Zhou frowned as if he had thought of something. A scheming smile appeared on his face. "Then let's add one more thing. Pull out all the weeds on the field. If you don't finish it, you're not allowed to eat today." Everyone's expression changed as they cried out in alarm. They had originally thought that if Peng Shui made a request, their teachers might be lenient. In the end, he went for wool and came home shorn. Not only did his punishment not lessen, it even increased. What the f***ck? They wanted to cry but had no tears. Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun looked at each other and revealed a smile that was hard to understand. They patted their butts and turned to leave. "What do we do now?" Shui Huan asked the crowd blankly. "What else can we do? Let's go pick up the dung." Someone casually replied, causing everyone's mood to fall to the bottom again. They looked at each other and helplessly walked back to the academy. At the same time, in White Deer College, Zhang Feng had just returned to the academy and was about to go to his residence to have a good rest. However, he was stopped by a voice. "Feng Zi, wait." He turned around and glanced. The person who had come was none other than the old scholar. It turned out that he still had a knot in his heart because of the incident when Zhang Feng went to Jiangnan. However, the 4 old men were there and he couldn't open his heart. Now that Zhang Feng was alone, he could talk about it. "Old scholar, what are you doing here?" Zhang Feng asked curiously. It turned out that it was class time. Normally, the old scholar should be in class. "I just came out to relieve myself and saw you. I have something to tell you. Come sit." The old scholar smiled and pointed to a stone stool beside him, indicating for him to sit. After the two of them sat down, Zhang Feng took out a cigarette from his waist and handed it to the old elementary scholar. He took out a lighter and lit it for the old elementary scholar. Then he took out another cigarette and lit it for himself. He slowly exhaled the smoke and said, "Old elementary scholar, what do you want to talk to me about?" The old scholar took a deep breath and said with satisfaction, "Feng Zi, last time, you Shernan and the other old men and I asked you if you wanted to go to Jiangnan. From your words and actions, I knew that you had to go. Although I don't want you to go, I know that I can't stop you. Therefore, I came to tell you about the dangers of Jiangnan." Chapter 1783. He had always regarded Zhang Feng as his own nephew. Therefore, this trip to Jiangnan was of great importance to him. "Go ahead." Zhang Feng tried his best to assume a serious listening posture. He was going to impart knowledge of Jiangnan to him. The old scholar took a deep puff of his cigarette and slowly said, "Ever since Uncle Tai and Zhongyong moved to Jiangnan, a large number of people from the north began to move south. Today, there is a gap between the population of the north and the south. Later, during the period of the 3 kingdoms, the kingdom of Wu occupied Jiangnan and began to prosper. They introduced many excellent agricultural varieties, such as millet, wheat, rice, hemp, sorghum, taro, and so on. Later, after successive dynasties improved production techniques and the superior natural conditions of Jiangnan, it is now considered the richest area in the country." Zhang Feng nodded thoughtfully. He really did not know about these things. The old scholar took another puff of his cigarette and held it between his 2 fingers. He continued, "In fact, these things are nothing. After all, These things can only be used to fill the stomach. The most important things are ceramics, sculptures, and colored glaze. Because of these things, many rich businessmen in Chang'an are happy to do business in Chang'an. This is also the reason why the clans are so powerful. Most of the money in the world is gathered in Chang'an. The rich businessmen have no choice but to go to Chang'an to discuss cooperation. This, Zhang Feng frowned and took a deep puff of his cigarette. He asked, "Then why is it that no one has broken this law?" Broken? The old scholar laughed subconsciously. The rich businessmen can make money and the clans can stabilize their position. Who would want to break this law? Besides, most of these technologies are in the hands of the clans. Usually, no one dares to go against them, but what? Zhang Feng asked subconsciously. But you have a chance. The old scholar put the cigarette in his mouth and revealed a meaningful smile. Zhang Feng frowned. His mind was spinning fast. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. You mean perfume? Not bad. The old scholar took the cigarette out of his mouth and smiled. You really have a good brain. Just think about it. Ceramics, sculptures, glass, and other things have always occupied a large market in Chang'an. If your perfume were to suddenly appear on the market, it would certainly cause a wave of reaction. At that time, the economic market in Chang'an might change. However, the specific operation depends on you. Zhang Feng put the cigarette in his mouth and fell into deep thought. Indeed, almost all of the economy in Chang'an was in the hands of the 5 families and 7 families. It was not easy to get a share of the profits. However, the bigger the family, the more conflicts there were. These guys might be fierce tigers in the eyes of others, but in his eyes, they were just insignificant insects. Thanks a lot. I'll remember that. Zhang Feng clasped his hands at the old elementary scholar to express his gratitude. Hey, why are we still talking about this between us? The old scholar waved his hand dismissively. Just as he finished speaking, a burst of brisk footsteps could be heard. Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao came over. Jingshu Yuyao, why are you here? Zhang Feng asked in confusion. Sir, young master, we were just taking a stroll around here. When we saw you, we came over to greet you. The 2 girls bowed to the old scholar and Zhang Feng in unison and said slowly. In fact, they had been wandering around and did not come forward when they saw Zhang Feng and the old scholar talking. Now that the 2 were almost done talking, they came forward. Young master, we just heard you and Sir talking about Chang'an. Did something happen in Chang'an? Jingshu looked at Zhang Feng and asked curiously. The 2 of them had overheard some of the conversation, but they couldn't hear it clearly, so they decided to ask. Zhang Feng waved his hand and replied casually, Nothing, I just decided to go to Chang'an. Hearing this, the 2 girls' hearts skipped a beat. Young master was going to Chang'an? Was he going to find you? Apart from this possibility, they could not think of any other. If this was true, their status would be threatened. The 2 girls looked at each other as if they were communicating something. Then, they nodded in unison. Young master, sir, we have something to do, so we'll take our leave. Jingshu bowed to Zhang Feng and the old scholar, then left with Zhang Yuyao. Zhang Feng was a little confused. Why did they leave after saying a few words? Old scholar, what are they doing? He looked at the old scholar and was a little confused. How would I know? Why don't you ask them? The old scholar took a deep puff of his cigarette and did not care. Then he looked at Zhang Feng and said, Come, let's continue talking about your trip to Chang'an. Zhang Feng nodded and glanced at the backs of the 2 girls, then slowly sat down. Looking back, the 2 girls did not stop walking after saying goodbye to Zhang Feng and went straight to their residence. Their hearts were pounding. Finally, they arrived at their residence after a while. Sister Jingshu closed the door. Zhang Yuyao said to Jingshu behind her as she entered the house first. Chapter 1784. Jingshu nodded and locked the door. Then, she turned around and sat on the bed. She looked at Zhang Yuyao, who was beside her. She looked a little nervous. Sister Yuyao, did you hear what they said just now? What do you think? Zhang Yuyao clenched her fists and tugged at the corner of her clothes. Sister Jingshu, I don't know either. Do you think Prince Zhang is going to Jiangnan for Yuyu? Jingshu's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. She thought so too. However, when she heard it from Zhang Yuyao, she couldn't help but feel nervous again. Yes, what if Prince Zhang went to Yuyu? Wouldn't she and her sister be left behind? Would Prince Zhang abandon her? Probably not. Prince Zhang wasn't that kind of person. In an instant, thousands of thoughts flooded her mind. Well, I don't know, but it's possible. She answered carefully. Although she didn't want to admit it, facts spoke louder than words. Then what should we do? Zhang Yuyao stood up abruptly. Her face was a little pale. She began to walk in small steps in the room. As she walked, she muttered under her breath. Prince Zhang is going to Jiangnan? What should we do? What if he goes to Yuilu? Seeing this, Jingshu stood up and grabbed Zhang Yuyao. She comforted her. Sister Yuyao, don't be nervous. Let's think of a way together. Although men in this era could have 3 wives and 4 concubines, which woman would give the man she liked to another woman? No one would, including the 2 of them. Zhang Yuyao glanced at Jingshu. She slowly calmed down. She held Jingshu's hand and asked anxiously, Sister Jingshu, do you have any ideas? Or don't let Prince Zhang go to Jiangnan. Jingshu waved her hand helplessly. It's impossible to stop Prince Zhang from going to Jiangnan. Didn't you hear what Master said just now? If even he couldn't persuade Prince Zhang, who else can? Then what should we do? Zhang Yuyao sat on the bed, feeling a little weak. Jingshu supported her chin with her hand, as if she was thinking about something. After a while, she seemed to have thought of something. She looked at Zhang Yuyao and said with a smile, Big Sister Yuyao, since we can't persuade Prince Zhang, why don't we go with Prince Zhang? Sure. Zhang Yuyao exclaimed and stood up from the bed. But in the next second, she put on a disappointed expression. What if Prince Zhang doesn't agree? Jingshu held Zhang Yuyao's hand and smiled. No, as long as we talk to Prince Zhang properly, it will definitely work. Okay, then let's talk together. Zhang Yuyao nodded. After saying that, she prepared to open the door and look for Zhang Feng. However, as soon as the door opened, a sturdy chest bumped into Zhang Yuyao. Zhang Yuyao retreated. Fortunately, Jingshu supported her from behind. Otherwise, she might have fallen. Zhang Yuyao was a little angry. She suddenly raised her head and opened her beautiful eyes. Just as she was about to argue with the other party, a handsome face came into view. It was the man they were just talking about, Zhang Feng. It turned out that Zhang Feng and the old scholar had just finished talking and decided to come over because he remembered the 2 girls' strange behavior. Unexpectedly, he bumped into them. Prince Zhang, why are you here? Zhang Yuyao's face was slightly red. She lowered her head like a little quail. That's right, young Master Zhang. Aren't you discussing business with Sir? Jingshu also reacted at this time and deliberately interjected to ease Zhang Yuyao's shyness. It had to be said that she was a very considerate sister. Oh, I finished talking with Master, so I came to see you. Zhang Feng scratched his head and smiled, trying to hide the embarrassment on his face. After all, he and the 2 girls were not married yet. This was indeed a little inappropriate. Jingshu seemed to see Zhang Feng's embarrassment and hurriedly greeted, Prince Zhang, please sit. Yes, please sit. Zhang Yuyao also reacted and picked up the teapot beside her to make tea for Zhang Feng. However, she couldn't hide the blush on her face. It was white with a hint of red, just like a peach. Zhang Feng nodded and casually found a chair to sit down. At this time, Zhang Yuyao also handed over the teacup in her hand and said shyly, Prince Zhang, please have some tea. Zhang Feng took the teacup and took a sip. He then put the teacup down and looked at the 2 girls. What happened to the 2 of you just now? Are you feeling unwell? Hearing this, the 2 girls remembered what they were just discussing. They looked at each other and nodded slightly, as if they were confirming something. Prince Zhang, we have a few questions to ask you. Zhang Yuyao looked at Zhang Feng and said softly. What is it? Why are you being so mysterious? Speak. Zhang Feng smiled and didn't mind. Prince Zhang, why do you want to go to Jiangnan? Zhang Yuyao went straight to the point. Because they just heard Zhang Feng and the old scholar talking, they didn't need to ask too much. Hearing this, Zhang Feng was stunned. No wonder the 2 girls were so abnormal just now. It was because of the matter in Jiangnan. Were they worried that he would go to Yu or something? Chapter 1785. However, he couldn't take the initiative to say this. Otherwise, who knew how the two women would react? I'm going to Chang'an to prepare to develop perfume and the maritime Silk Road. Zhang Feng replied truthfully. In fact, he didn't say that he was going to find Yu. After all, if he said it in person, it might affect the mood of the two women. Then, Prince Zhang, can you take us with you when you go to Jiangnan? This sentence was said by Jingshu because she knew that Zhang Yuyao's character had always been very gentle. It was not suitable for her to say such things. Zhang Feng's brows furrowed tightly when he heard that. It was not that he didn't want to take the two women, but Jiangnan was too dangerous. He had no foundation. If he went there empty-handed, he might not even be able to guarantee his own safety. How could he take care of the two women? Yu was a small matter. After all, the two women had seen her. Even if there was a small quarrel, it could be resolved. Moreover, the two women were reasonable people, so there wouldn't be any problems. However, if the foundation was not stable, there was no way to guarantee their safety. Thinking of this, he immediately refused. No, Jiangnan is not safe. You may be in danger if you go there. Young master, we are not afraid. Jingshu shook her head. There was a trace of firmness in her eyes. Yes, we are not afraid. Young master, take us with you. Zhang Yuyao also begged. Zhang Feng glanced at the two women. His mind was spinning quickly, weighing something. In the end, he spat out two words, no. Although he had never been to Jiangnan, after listening to the old scholar's words, he deeply understood that Jiangnan was not so easy to get involved. There were many clans there. Maybe it would be annexed that day. It was a bit inconvenient to take the two women with him. Young master, Zhang Yuyao's eyes were filled with tears. She lowered her head and pulled the corner of her clothes. It's not that I don't want to take you with me, but Jiangnan is too dangerous. I'll go there first and then pick you up later. Zhang Feng was a little helpless. He gently patted Zhang Yuyao's shoulder. Young master, please take us with you. We're not afraid of danger and we won't cause you any trouble. Jingshu looked at Zhang Feng with a pleading look, looking very pitiful. Young master, the tears in Zhang Yuyao's eyes seemed as if they would fall at any moment. She tugged at Zhang Feng's sleeve and said in a faint voice, Young master, please take us with you. We promise that we won't cause you any trouble. Jingshu also imitated Zhang Yuyao. She tugged at Zhang Feng's other sleeve, raised her head, and said softly, Yes, young master. We won't cause you any trouble. Zhang Feng looked at the two women helplessly and frowned. He didn't expect the two girls to do this. It was not safe in Jiangnan, and they might run into Yu, which would be awkward. Don't agree. Which man could refuse two beautiful women acting coquettishly? Okay, I promise you, but you have to promise me one thing. Zhang Feng nodded heavily, as if he had made a huge struggle in his heart. Hearing this, the two women were instantly overjoyed. The sadness just now was also thrown away. With a satisfied smile on their faces, they said, Thank you, young master. As for the second half of Zhang Feng's words, the two women didn't listen at all. He had no choice but to remind them, after you go to Jiangnan with me, you have to listen to me in everything. You can't make decisions on your own. He did this for the good of the two women. After all, he was not familiar with Jiangnan at all. What if something happened? She told them here to give them a heads up. The two women were completely immersed in joy. No matter what Zhang Feng said, they nodded hard. Okay, we promise you anything. Zhang Feng nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, Well, I'll go first. After that, he walked straight to the door and closed it for the two women. Only the two women were left in the room. Their faces were full of joy as they held each other's hands. Sister Yuyao, since young master has promised us, let's prepare the things to go to Jiangnan so that we won't be in a hurry. Jingshu looked at Zhang Yuyao and said with a smile, Okay, Sister Jingshu. After that, Zhang Yuyao pulled Jingshu to the bed. The two women sat on the bed and packed up the things they thought they could use. After a while, the two women's discussion came from the room. This dress is too thick. It's not suitable for Jiangnan. Sister Jingshu, let's take this rouge. We can't embarrass Prince Zhang when we go to Jiangnan. We also have to take this Guqin. Otherwise, what if Prince Zhang wants to listen to music? In this way, the two women discussed happily as if they didn't know the meaning of tiredness at all. Women were like this. Once they were going on a long trip, they would take care of everything from daily necessities to gold, silver, and jewelry. Looking back at Zhang Feng, he came out from the two women and went straight to his residence. He sat in a chair, slowly lit a cigarette, took a deep breath, and exhaled the smoke, showing a satisfied look. Chapter 1786. This feeling made him feel very comfortable. He narrowed his eyes and recalled the conversation he had with the old elementary scholar. The old elementary scholar was actually a nostalgic person. Although he said that Jiangnan was not good, he still understood that Jiangnan was powerful and irreplaceable. This time, he would go to Jiangnan to help the Xie family and repay the old elementary scholar's kindness. Thinking about it, he put the cigarette back in his mouth and took a deep puff. He glanced out of the window and saw that the moon was already high in the sky. It was already nighttime. Zhang Feng exhaled a mouthful of smoke and stood up abruptly. He threw the cigarette butt on the ground and stamped it out. He turned around and walked to his bed. There was no entertainment in the academy at night and everyone went to bed early. He was no exception, except for some naughty guys who liked to play basketball. He quickly took off his clothes and lay on the bed to count the stars. After a while, there was a light snoring sound in the room. The next day, a long yawn came from the room. Zhang Feng rubbed his sleepy eyes and slowly opened them. He glanced at the messy clothes on the bed and began to put them on. After putting on his clothes, he jumped out of bed and washed his face with the water he had prepared. He felt much more awake. Then, he took out a cigarette from his waist and put it in his mouth. He lit the match and took a deep puff. He exhaled the smoke and pretended to be satisfied. Another day. He enjoyed the impact of the smoke with a smile on his face. Zhang Feng opened the door and walked to the academy. He was going to walk around. This was what he had been used to doing every day since he returned to the academy. He would get up early in the morning to see how the students were doing. He also wanted to see if those fellows were slacking off. It was a bit like the director of academic affairs in the modern world. Before he reached the door of the classroom, he heard a burst of students reading aloud in a loud voice. A wise man must see far and see clearly. If he does not see clearly, he must not be selfish. A man of law must be strong and resolute. If he is not resolute, he must not be deceitful. Zhang Feng nodded his head. This voice was very familiar to him. He didn't walk closer, but instead glanced at the classroom. It was the old elementary scholar who was teaching. The student was holding a book in his hand, shaking his head and squinting his eyes as he recited the text. Seeing this, Zhang Feng nodded in satisfaction and walked towards the field. He wanted to see if that guy was slacking off. As soon as he reached the sports field, he heard a burst of cheers. "Pass the ball to me quickly. I'm going to shoot a three-pointer." Zhang Feng gently pushed aside the leaves in front of him and glanced at the field. He didn't know if he didn't look, but when he saw it, he was shocked. It turned out that a few guys were secretly playing basketball here, and they were playing quite enthusiastically. Among them were Yun Ping and Yiming. These two guys had guarded the school gate during the opening ceremony of the basketball tournament and had even woken him up. They were usually more mischievous. However, he didn't expect these two guys to be so bold as to play basketball during class time. Playing basketball was a good thing in itself. It could strengthen one's body. However, playing basketball during class was not only against the school rules, but also irresponsible to oneself. Therefore, he decided to teach these guys a lesson. In the past, he didn't study hard and suffered a lot in finding a job. Although there were no such restrictions in Chang'an, and as the dean, how could he watch these guys degrade themselves? Thinking of this, Zhang Feng's chest was filled with anger. He shouted at the sports field, "Who allowed you to play basketball here?" Hearing this, the guys on the sports field were immediately stunned. They knew that the only person who could come to the sports field at this time was the dean. The students and teachers were all in class. They slowly put down the basketball and glanced at Zhang Feng's position. They shivered and turned to look at each other. Someone said, "The dean is so far away from us. He probably doesn't remember what we look like, right? It was fine if he didn't say it, but once he said it, it instantly aroused everyone's thoughts. Yes, we're so far away. The dean can't see us at all. If they took the opportunity to run now, nothing would happen. They looked at each other as if they had a tacit understanding. Then they nodded. As if they had made up their minds, they ran in one direction. With the first one taking the lead, there would naturally be a second one. The people behind were afraid of falling behind and being caught by Zhang Feng, so they also ran toward the first person like wild horses out of control. Seeing this, Zhang Feng's expression changed. He was instantly angry. He began to shout at the top of his voice, "Yiming Yunping, if you two brats run again, you don't have to come to class tomorrow." After saying that, he hurriedly chased after her. When Yiming and Yunping heard this, their hearts skipped a beat. The dean knew it was them? Then what's the use of running away now? Wouldn't they still be punished by the dean? Perhaps if they were caught, the punishment would be even more severe? The two of them looked sullen and subconsciously stopped in their tracks. This sudden stop was not a big deal, but the students behind them all tumbled down, and even they themselves staggered forward. Chapter 1787. It turned out that the two of them were running at the front. When they suddenly stopped, the people behind them did not notice and bumped into them. The result was obvious. Everyone fell flat on their faces. "Yiming Yunping, why did you two suddenly stop?" A student hugged his injured knee and wailed on the ground, glaring at Yiming and Yunping in dissatisfaction. Yiming and Yunping did not feel good either. They were half lying on the ground, their knees bleeding. "Didn't you hear the dean calling us? Are you deaf?" Yunping rubbed his bleeding knee and said unhappily, "The dean is calling for you, not us. Why are you blocking our way?" Another student jumped out and pointed at the two of them, his heart filled with grief and indignation. He thought that he was about to escape the dean's clutches. Who would have thought that this stupid teammate would cause trouble in the middle? Blocking the way in the middle. This was great. Everyone could not escape and was ready to be punished. Damn you. When did Lao Tzu? Yiming's eyes were red as he glared at that person. However, before he could finish his sentence, he saw someone rushing over. It was none other than Zhang Feng. He quickly put on a fawning expression and said, "Dean, you're here." Hearing that, everyone instantly forgot about what had just happened and quickly turned to look at Zhang Feng. At this moment, Zhang Feng was half lying on the ground with his hands on his knees. Beads of sweat could be seen on his forehead. His mouth was wide open. He glanced at everyone from time to time and lowered his heavy head. He pointed at them and said, "You?" Obviously, Zhang Feng was tired from chasing these guys. He rarely exercised. Coupled with the sudden acceleration, his body could not take it. "All of you, stand properly." He panted heavily and rubbed his back. He tried his best to stand up and pointed at everyone. No one dared to delay. They supported each other and stood up in pain. They tried their best not to make a sound. Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and patted his chest to calm himself down. Then, he looked at everyone with a gloomy expression and said, "Why did you come out to play basketball during class?" He had also been through this stage, so he could understand everyone's thoughts. He did not intend to pursue the matter of them running away. He just wanted to pull them back on the right track and not just think about playing every day. "Dean, we just want to have some fun. We'll go to class soon." Yiming scratched his head, feeling a little embarrassed. With the first person speaking, the others also began to plead for mercy, hoping that Zhang Feng would let them go. "That's right, Dean. We just want to have fun. Please let us off this time. Dean, please be magnanimous and let us off this time." Everyone was begging for mercy with a pleading look on their faces, which made one want to laugh. But how could Zhang Feng smile in this kind of situation? He coughed twice and said earnestly, "I know you're playful. This is human nature, and I don't intend to do anything to you. But your parents sent you to the academy so that you can learn something and serve the country and the people in the future, and become the pillars of the Tang dynasty. Look at what you've done today. How can you face your parents?" Everyone bowed their heads and said nothing, as if they were thinking about something. Then, Zhang Feng continued, "Since you violated the school rules today, the punishment is unavoidable. Everyone, go and water the flowers and plants on campus. Then, Everyone will take turns to guard the school gate at night until everyone completes the punishment. Do you understand? These guys had violated the school rules and must be punished. Otherwise, more people would follow suit in the future, and the school would be in chaos. Everyone nodded and still did not speak. Well, you can go to class first and complete the punishment after class. Zhang Feng waved to the crowd and motioned them to leave. They looked at Zhang Feng and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Then they dispersed in twos and threes. After everyone left, Zhang Feng walked to the cafeteria. He was so tired from chasing those guys just now that he was hungry. Besides, he got up early in the morning and did not eat anything. Now, his stomach was growling. Unable to bear the protest of his stomach, Zhang Feng had to speed up. After a while, he finally arrived at the entrance of the cafeteria. "Boss, give me some lamb stew." He randomly found a seat and shouted at the boss who was busy at the side. When the boss saw that it was Zhang Feng, he immediately put on a smile. "Oh, it's President Zhang. Please wait a moment. The lamb stew will be served soon. Have some tea first." After saying that, the boss came up with a pot of tea. Zhang Feng was his big boss, so he did not dare to neglect him. "Come, have some tea. The lamb stew is being prepared at the back." The boss was very fast. He quickly poured a bowl of tea and handed it to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng took the tea and slowly tasted it. "President Zhang, the basketball game you organized last time was really good. When can you organize it again?" The boss took the opportunity to chat with Zhang Feng while the lamb stew was being prepared at the back. He made a lot of money from the basketball game last time. Although a lot of business was taken away by the people, it was not a big deal. After all, without Zhang Feng, he could not have organized it. Therefore, he hoped that Zhang Feng would organize it again. Chapter 1788. "Oh, I don't know." Zhang Feng put down his teacup and replied calmly. He really wasn't sure when he would hold it again, so he could only give the boss a perfunctory answer. "I see." The boss was a bit disappointed, but he quickly covered it up and put on a smile again. "Then you can drink first. I'll go check on the lamb stew." With that, he turned and walked towards the kitchen. "Right, boss, give me some braised meat." Zhang Feng turned around and added. The boss smiled and nodded, indicating that he understood. Moments later, the boss walked out of the kitchen with a waiter, carrying lamb stew and braised meat. Most importantly, there was a jug of fine wine. "Here, President Zhang, the lamb stew and braised meat you ordered are here." The boss walked in front of Zhang Feng and put down the dishes one by one. "Boss, I didn't order any wine." Zhang Feng pointed at the jug, a bit confused. "Hey, Principal, eating meat without drinking won't last long." The boss smiled and put the jug in front of Zhang Feng. "This wine is a gift from me. Drink as much as you want." With that, the boss walked away with the waiter, not giving Zhang Feng a chance to speak. Zhang Feng looked at the boss's back and thought to himself, "The boss is quite interesting. Not only is he glib, but he also knows how to make trouble." He shook his head with a smile and didn't think too much about it. He picked up the skewers and began to roll them. He poured himself a bowl of wine, and under a gust of wind, his stomach was 70 to 80% full. Just as Zhang Feng was about to pick up the last piece of braised meat, a series of hurried footsteps came from the door. Moments later, a tall man walked in. He looked around as if he was looking for something. When he saw Zhang Feng, he immediately became excited. Principal, I finally found you." Zhang Feng turned around and looked at the man, a bit confused. "Who are you? Why are you looking for me?" Basically, everyone in the academy called him principal. There was no problem with this title, but he didn't have any impression of this person, so he couldn't help but be confused. The man grew anxious. "Dean, I'm Xianxia. I'm researching firearms with Algernon." At this point, Zhang Feng suddenly remembered something. He pointed at the person and said, "Oh, I remember now. You were the one who researched firearms with Algernon." A smile finally appeared on Xianxia's face. "Dean, you finally remembered." Zhang Feng nodded with a smile. He had no choice. There were so many people in the smithing workshop in the academy, so how could he remember all of them? It was good enough that he had some influence. However, this little influence was a great gift to Xianxia. "Oh right, aren't you in the forging workshop? What are you doing here?" Zhang Feng placed the braised meat in his mouth and asked vaguely. As soon as he finished speaking, Shi-En cautiously scanned the surroundings. After confirming that no one was eavesdropping, he slowly leaned over to Zhang Feng and whispered in his ear, "Principal, Algernon asked me to tell you that the firearms have been successfully modified and that there's a new invention." Before he came, Algernon had warned him that the firearms were not to be known by outsiders. That was why he was so cautious. Of course, he also knew the severity of the matter. He didn't dare to reveal anything to anyone. Hearing this, Zhang Feng's face lit up. He hurriedly pulled Shi-En out of the door and said, "Let's go back to the forging workshop." Now, he couldn't wait to see what Algernon's gun would look like. Shi-En was naturally happy as well. The two of them rushed to the forging workshop without stopping. Before long, they arrived at the workshop. When they entered, they saw that everyone was gathered in a circle with Algernon in the center. They didn't know what they were doing. "Algernon, what are you guys doing?" Zhang Feng asked subconsciously. Hearing this, everyone turned to look at Zhang Feng. Their faces were filled with joy. It seemed that Algernon's experiment had been very successful. "Principal, you're here. We're researching steel balls, which are bullets." Algernon pushed aside the crowd and walked towards Zhang Feng. "Bullets?" Zhang Feng glanced at the steel balls on the table, completely forgetting about the firearms. He walked towards the wooden table and picked up a steel ball. "Why are you researching these?" "Principal, we found that the steel balls aren't very powerful, so we're thinking of ways to improve them." Algernon walked to Zhang Feng's side and looked at the steel balls on the table. He was somewhat helpless. Algernon's words reminded Zhang Feng of the real bullets in his previous life. Those bullets were usually made up of 4 parts: a pellet, a cartridge, a propellant, and a cap. The pellet was used to penetrate the target at high speed. The cartridge was used to connect the pellet, protect the propellant, and seal the gunpowder gas. The propellant was burned to give the pellet a higher initial velocity. The cap was used to fire the pellet. Algernon and the others couldn't make such bullets now. However, they could slightly change the shape of the steel balls. That way, they could still cause damage. "Algernon, did you guys have any results?" Zhang Feng looked at Algernon and asked. Chapter 1789. "Dean, we've been studying it for a long time, but we still have no idea." Alkinnon frowned and felt helpless. Zhang Feng patted Alkinnon's shoulder and encouraged him. "Don't be discouraged. Have you thought of changing the shape of the steel balls?" He decided to teach them the theory behind the bullets and let them slowly figure it out. Change the shape. Alkinnon's eyes lit up as if he had discovered a new continent. "Dean, what kind of change do you mean?" The dean's words had opened up a wedge in his heart. However, he only had a vague idea, so he decided to ask for clarification. "Think about it. How did a spear stab an enemy? Isn't it because of the sharp tip? If we make the steel balls like a spear and make them sharp, wouldn't the effect be different?" Zhang Feng's gaze swept over the crowd as he tried to entice them. Hearing this, everyone lowered their heads and pondered deeply, their brows tightly knit together. After a while, Alkinnon seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly said, "Dean, your suggestion is good. The sharp tip is much more lethal than the steel balls. Once it's shot, it can easily pierce through armor." Zhang Feng nodded with satisfaction. "You're right. However, this won't do. We have to increase the size of the barrel. Once the sharp-tip bullet is made, it will definitely be longer than the steel balls. Also, gunpowder will need to be added to the bullet and a cap at the base. Only then will it be able to unleash its full power." He knew that Alkinnon was a talent in this field. No matter what he said, Alkinnon would be able to react immediately. "Dean, I know what gunpowder is, but what is a cap?" Alkinnon looked at Zhang Feng with confusion. The others were also confused. They were helpless. Zhang Feng's words were too advanced. It was normal that they didn't understand. "Give me a pen and paper. I'll explain it to you as I draw." Zhang Feng smiled faintly and said to everyone. As his voice fell, one of the men standing outside immediately ran out. After a while, he ran back in with a pen and paper in his hand. He handed the pen and paper to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng took it and leaned on the table. He glanced at everyone and said as he drew, "Look, this is the pointed bullet we talked about just now. It is made up of the shell, primer, propellant, and warhead. The shell is the outer layer of metal. It can be made of iron or steel, but it must be made into a cylinder. Look at the warhead. This is the tip of the entire bullet and needs to be made into a sharp point. The propellant, this is the gunpowder, needs to be filled in the shell. Finally, there is the primer, which is also the most important. It needs to be installed at the end of the entire bullet, which is also the cylinder, wrapping the entire back of the bullet." After saying that, the blueprint for the bullet was completed. Zhang Feng took the blueprint and handed it to Arkanon. "Take a look. Can you make this bullet?" This was just an overview of the bullet, so it was relatively simple. A talent like Arkanon could understand it with just a few glances. As Zhang Feng expected, Arkanon took the blueprint and looked at it carefully for a while. Finally, he said seriously, "This bullet can be made, but the trajectory of the gun needs to be changed." Zhang Feng nodded and rested his chin on his right hand. "This is not a problem. Changing the trajectory will only increase the power of the gun. Take some time to study it." When he thought of this bullet, he already knew that the trajectory might need to be changed. The trajectory changed with the bullet, or in other words, the trajectory needed to adapt to the bullet. For modern bullets like this, the trajectory needed to be slender and flexible. Otherwise, the trajectory would be destroyed in a short period of time. "Okay then." Arkanon agreed and began to study the drawing again. At this time, Zhang Feng seemed to have thought of something. He said to Arkanon, "Oh right, Arkanon, didn't you ask me to come here to look at the gun?" Yes. "Look at my brain, I almost forgot." Arkanon patted his head, a little embarrassed. Zhang Feng didn't blame him, because he knew that for a freak like Arkanon who only cared about research, if something suddenly attracted him, he would quickly fall into it. Just like when they were talking about the bullet, everyone was so excited that they naturally forgot about the gun. Even Zhang Feng himself had forgotten about it until now. This is the improved gun. Arkanon took the gun from the table next to him and handed it to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng looked at the gun in Arkanon's hand with a strange expression. It was not for any other reason, but because this gun was very different from the previous one. Not only was the barrel much longer, at least 10 centimeters, but the body was also slender. He asked with some confusion, "Arkanon, why does this gun look different from the previous one?" "Dean, this is our newly improved gun. It has been lengthened by 10 centimeters and the body has become slender. However, the most important thing is that the accuracy of this gun has increased a lot. Even if you haven't used it before, you won't miss too much." Chapter 1790. Arkanon showed off the gun in his hand. It seemed that he was very satisfied with this product. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Feng's eyes couldn't leave the gun in Arkanon's hand. He took the gun and examined it carefully. After a while, he laughed loudly. Good. Arkanon, I didn't expect you to improve this gun in such a short time." He didn't doubt them because he believed that they had the ability to improve the gun. It was just that the time it took was too short. "Dean, I have a new invention here." As he spoke, Arkanon took out an object that was about 30 centimeters long. To be precise, it was a 30-centimeter long gun. It was exactly the same as the original gun, just a little shorter. Everyone stared at the miniature gun in Arkanon's hand. They felt a little nervous. This gun was made by all of them and was prepared to be presented to the dean. Now that they had taken it out, they didn't know if the dean would like it. Everyone looked at Zhang Feng with apprehension. At this moment, Zhang Feng's gaze was also locked on the miniature gun. He had already noticed it when Arkanon took it out. However, he found it hard to believe that they could make such a small gun. It seemed that he had underestimated them. "Did you guys make this gun?" Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and asked. Everyone nodded. Arkanon still looked as if he was handing the gun to Zhang Feng. Seeing this, Zhang Feng reached out and took the gun. He fiddled with it in his hand and couldn't help but smile. No man could resist the temptation of a gun, including himself. "Dean, this gun was made by all of us working together. We hope that it will be of some help to you during your trip to Chang'an." Arkanon looked at everyone and finally fixed his gaze on Zhang Feng. His eyes were full of sincerity. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone looked at Zhang Feng. They all saw Zhang Feng as their benefactor. Without him, they wouldn't have been able to come into contact with this level of technology. Now that their benefactor liked this gun, it was an affirmation to all of them. Zhang Feng looked at everyone and couldn't help but reveal a touched expression. Originally, he did not take the initiative to tell everyone about him in Jiangnan, but they were concerned about his every move. It had to be said that this friendship was very rare. Thank you, everyone. I like this gun. Zhang Feng raised the gun in his hand and said with a smile. Currently, everyone's technology was only limited to long-barreled firearms. Today, however, they had created a 30-centimeter firearm. From this, it could be seen that everyone had put in a lot of effort. As the dean, he naturally had to give them some encouragement. It's fine as long as the headmaster likes it. At least our efforts were not in vain. Arcanon looked at Zhang Feng excitedly. As he spoke, he glanced at the others. Everyone was also looking at Zhang Feng excitedly. Their emotions were self-evident. Since we have this good stuff, let's go out and shoot. Let's go. Zhang Feng waved at the crowd and said with a smile. Now that he had the gun in his hands, he wanted to try it out. Yes, headmaster. Arcanon nodded and then looked at the people behind him. Take the bullets and wooden plates. We're going to the back of the mountain. After saying that, he followed Zhang Feng to the back of the mountain. The others followed closely behind with the items. The back of the mountain was not far away. It was just outside the cave. The group walked quickly and arrived at the back of the mountain one after another. Zhang Feng pointed to an open space in front of them. Like last time, draw 10 circles on the wooden plates and put them up in front of us. The person holding the wooden plates quickly put them up and then led the others to the side. He was afraid that the gun would be blind and accidentally hurt him. They had all participated in the production of the gun and deeply understood the power of the gun. Headmaster here. You can try our improved long-barreled firearms first. Arcanon handed a loaded long-barreled firearm to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng took it and checked it. After confirming that there was no problem, he put the gun on his shoulder and began to aim at the wooden plates. Bang! The gun spewed out a tongue of flame. The steel ball shot out and hit the wooden plates. At this time, the sound of wild birds could be heard from the forest not far away. In an instant, a flock of wild birds took to the air and flew away. Zhang Feng's face changed slightly. He could not believe it. When he fired the gun just now, he clearly felt that this gun was different from the previous ones. Not only was the smoke reduced, but the recoil was also not as bad as before. He could not believe it, so he decided to fire another shot. He reloaded the gun and aimed at the wooden plates. Bang! Another shot. It felt the same as the first time. Not only was it smoother, but it was also more accurate. This time, Zhang Feng was finally sure that this gun was exactly as Arcanon had said. He quickly put down the gun and walked to the wooden plates. He wanted to check the accuracy of the wooden plates, but when he got closer, he felt uncomfortable. Chapter 1791. It turned out that he had hit the bullseye with both shots. He had always missed the target before, but this time he actually hit the bullseye. It was unbelievable. What's going on, Alkinen? Zhang Feng looked at Alkinen and asked. Dean, this time we not only improved the guns, but also improved their accuracy. Even those who don't know how to shoot will not miss too much. Alkinen smiled. Hearing this, Zhang Feng patted Alkinen's shoulder happily. Good, thank you for your hard work this time. Dean, don't mention it. This is what we should do. Alkinen was a little frightened. Zhang Feng nodded. These guns were not only more powerful, but also more adaptable. If they were mass-produced, they would definitely become the killing weapons of the Tang Dynasty soldiers. Let's go and see that short-barreled gun. He smiled and said to Alkinen. After that, Zhang Feng went back to the shooting position, grabbed a handful of bullets, and loaded them into the gun. Then he aimed at the wooden sign. Bang! The gun trembled for a moment, and the steel ball shot out and nailed itself onto the wooden tablet. Zhang Feng took the gun and walked to the wooden sign. This time, it was a bullseye. Although it was a little off, it was already very good. After the experiment with the long-barreled gun, he was not surprised. However, this short-barreled gun was obviously more convenient than the long-barreled gun. It could be used for self-defense. With this gun, this trip to Chang'an would not be too stressful. He held the gun and played with it. He was delighted. He saw everyone's loyalty and hard work, so he would definitely reward them well. However, these people were stubborn. They were not interested in gold, silver, and treasures at all. How to reward them was difficult for him. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind. Since these people were only interested in guns, then he would do something about them. Although these guns had been improved, they were still not very good. If he gave them the pistols and rifles of the future, they might have an unexpected gain. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng smiled and waved to everyone. "Come here, all of you. I have something important to say." Hearing this, everyone moved and surrounded Zhang Feng, waiting for him to continue. "You guys did very well this time, so I've decided to teach you guys about another type of gun." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's faces changed. Their cheeks flushed red in agitation. To them, Zhang Feng was both their benefactor and their teacher. This was because he was the one who gave them the opportunity to come into contact with such advanced technology. Furthermore, he was constantly imparting knowledge to them. This was simply a greater grace than anything else. Now that Zhang Feng said that he was going to teach them about another type of gun, how could they not be excited? "Dean, please speak your mind. We are all listening." "Yes, Dean. We are all listening." Everyone expressed their stance, wanting Zhang Feng to continue. There were even a few people who took out their pens and paper, ready to record. Seeing this, Zhang Feng did not waste any time. He smiled and said, "The type of gun I'm going to talk about is called a pistol. It is similar to the short-barreled guns that you guys make. However, it is more stable than short-barreled guns. It has higher shooting accuracy, longer aiming line of sight, and other advantages. A pistol is mainly composed of a barrel, a grip, a firing mechanism, a sleeve, and other parts." Everyone looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled expression. They were a little confused. "Dean, can you explain in detail?" Everyone is a little confused. Arcanon swept his gaze over the crowd and finally fixed his gaze on Zhang Feng, a difficult expression on his face. "Don't be anxious. Listen to me slowly. Give me a piece of paper." Zhang Feng smiled faintly and didn't blame them. He asked for a pen and paper and randomly found a stone. He laid down on it and drew as he said to everyone, "Look at this barrel first. It's used to fire the bullet. It's the same principle as a musket. Next, we'll talk about the grip. This is used to hold the grip. It's designed for the convenience of the hand. The firing mechanism is used to fire the bullet. It needs to use the principle of the firing pin. The firing mechanism needs to use the primer to strike the primer. The sleeve is the container for the firing pin. It uses a spring to move to the rearmost position during firing. The trigger is used to fire the trigger." After that, a sketch of a pistol appeared in front of everyone. Zhang Feng handed the sketch to Algernon and said, "You can treat this as an upgraded version of the short-barreled gun." After Algernon received the sketch, it was as if he had changed into a different person. He could not stop trembling. Beads of sweat could be seen on his forehead. Even his voice was trembling. "Dean, this is a divine item?" After that, he passed the blueprints to the others. Everyone who saw the blueprints trembled with excitement, just like Arcanon. How did the Dean come up with this divine item? This is amazing. They had all participated in the production of short-barreled guns. They knew how difficult it was to make such a gun. They knew that it would be impossible in their lifetime. However, the Dean had drawn it so easily and even explained it so clearly. Chapter 1792. Everyone quivered and looked at Zhang Feng with eyes full of respect and envy. Zhang Feng smiled faintly. "Come, I'll tell you one more." Then, he took out a new piece of paper, glanced at everyone, and started to draw on the rock. "Next, I'll tell you about a rifle. You can think of it as an upgraded version of a long-barreled musket. It consists of a barrel, a case, a trigger, a magazine, a firing mechanism, a aiming device, and a stock. It only has a case, a magazine, and a aiming device. You can think of the case as a cartridge container and a magazine. It's a little different from a long-barreled musket. The magazine is installed between the stock and the barrel, while the magazine is a separate entity. It can be removed from the body of the gun, and every time it's removed, it needs to be loaded with bullets. The aiming device is the crosshair. Although it's on a musket too, it's not as detailed. The rifle needs to be more detailed than the musket, but there's no other difference. As soon as he finished speaking, an overview of the rifle was completed. Zhang Feng handed the blueprint to Arcanon. Arcanon took the blueprint and looked at it. He was even more excited than before. His eyes widened in disbelief because he knew that this rifle was much more powerful than the long-barreled musket. Not only was it powerful, but most importantly, with this ammunition supply, the rifle could fire continuously. There was no need to reload a bullet for every shot. Just this point alone was enough to beat the long-barreled musket. Arcanon, I'll give you the blueprint for the pistol and rifle. I've explained the theory to you. If you have any questions, you can come to me. I'll make these two things. Hearing this, Arcanon shuddered. This was exactly what he had been dreaming of. Now that the dean was giving it to him, how could he not be happy? However, after thinking about it, the dean had been so nice to him. How could he accept the dean's gift? Dean, you've been so nice to us. We can't accept your gift. Please take it back. Arcanon respectfully put the blueprint in his hand and was about to return it to Zhang Feng. The others looked at the blueprints unwillingly because they had the same desire for the technology as Arcanon. However, they could understand what Arcanon was saying. Indeed, the dean had taken them in and even taught them the technology. If they were to blindly accept them now, wouldn't that mean that they weren't grateful at all? Zhang Feng looked at the crowd, and his eyes flashed with a touch of gratification. He had thought that everyone would be very happy to accept the blueprint, but he didn't expect them to say such words. This was indeed beyond his expectations, but it was enough to see their loyalty. There's no need for that. Since I'm giving them to you, just accept them. I still need these firearms. Arcanon looked at the blueprint in his hand, feeling a little troubled. He then turned around to look at the others. Seeing this, Zhang Feng smiled faintly and glanced at everyone. Take it. I'll be happy if you can make the firearms as soon as possible. All right then. Algernon nodded and expressed his loyalty. Don't worry, Mr. President. We won't let you down. Even if we don't eat or drink, we'll make it and give it to you personally. As soon as he finished speaking, the others behind him quickly agreed. That's right. Don't worry, Mr. President. We won't let you down. We'll definitely make it. Don't worry, Mr. President. We'll make it. They clenched their right fists and spoke with confidence. Of course I'm not worried about you. Zhang Feng nodded with satisfaction and waved at everyone. You can go back and do your research. I still have things to do at the college. After speaking, he turned and walked towards the college. Everyone said their goodbyes. He took out a cigarette from his waist, lit it, and slowly smoked. He didn't say anything along the way, and soon he arrived at the college. At this time, classes had just ended, and the students were playing in the college. Some people were playing basketball on the field, and many students were taking a walk. Hello, Mr. President. When the students saw Zhang Feng walk over, they stopped and greeted him. Zhang Feng waved his hand at the crowd and walked straight to his residence. At this time, two figures in front of him attracted his attention. He took a closer look and saw that they weren't Yiming and Yunping, who he had just caught in the morning. He quickly walked up and patted them on the shoulder. Yiming, Yunping, what are you two doing? The two of them were shocked and turned around. When they saw Zhang Feng's face, their expressions changed and they stammered, President. What are you two doing here? Have you done your punishment this morning? Zhang Feng looked at them and asked. Yes, we did. Yiming lowered his head and replied with a trembling voice. Okay, I'll find time to check. If you didn't do it, your punishment will be doubled. Zhang Feng nodded and turned to walk back to his residence. He had been explaining the concept of pistols and rifles, and he was a little tired. He was going to go back and rest. He didn't expect Yiming and Yunping to run away as soon as he left, as if they had something important to do. Zhang Feng felt that something was wrong behind him. He glanced at them casually and saw their backs. A complicated smile flashed across his lips. Chapter 1793. What he said just now was naturally to scare the two boys. He didn't expect that they really didn't do it. Zhang Feng took out a cigarette from his waist, lit it, took a deep puff, and walked back to his residence. After returning to his residence, he half reclined on the chair and was about to take a nap. Just then, a loud roar came from outside the door. Fengzi, are you there? Without looking, he knew that it was old Cheng. His hoarse voice could be heard 2 streets away. Zhang Feng slowly sat up and looked at the door helplessly. Sure enough, Li Shimin walked in with Cheng Yaojin. "Ha, I knew you were here." Cheng Yaojin took a big step forward and patted Zhang Feng on the shoulder. "Well, if nothing goes wrong, I'll be here in the future." Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Cheng Yaojin and said unhappily, "Fengzi, what's wrong with you? You look like you haven't woken up yet." Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng and was a little worried. "It's nothing." Zhang Feng waved his hand and gestured for the two to sit down. "Why are you free to look for me today?" He didn't intend to tell them about the forging workshop. Firstly, this thing was a little shocking. If he suddenly told them, they might not be able to accept it. Secondly, he didn't know if Chang'an and the others could make it. If they could, he would naturally tell them in the future. "I asked you to come here to drink. What else could it be?" Cheng Yaojin pursed his lips, looking as if he was in the right. "I don't have time to drink with you." Zhang Feng glared at Cheng Yaojin. This guy only knew how to drink every day. Of course, it's not just about drinking. There's also about Jiangnan. Li Shimin interjected from the side. "Jiangnan?" Zhang Feng turned to look at Li Shimin and was a little puzzled. "What can happen in Jiangnan? Aren't you going to Jiangnan? We just got some recent news in Jiangnan and wanted to tell you about it." Li Shimin smiled. Hearing this, Zhang Feng's interest was piqued. "What news? Quick, tell me." Jiangnan was now the focus of his development, so he had to know all the important information there. That way, he would not be clueless in the past. Li Shimin moved closer to Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "I heard, cough cough." Just as Li Shimin was halfway through his speech, a cough from outside the door interrupted him. Zhang Feng and the others raised their heads to look outside the door. The coughing sound was rather obvious, but it happened when Lao Li coughed halfway through his sentence. It seemed to be intentional. He wanted to see who it was. Moments later, Yu Shinan, Ouyang Xiao, and the rest walked in with stooped backs. Seeing this, Zhang Feng immediately stood up from his chair and said respectfully, "Greetings, teachers." These were all his teachers. They had just come in, so as a disciple he naturally could not sit. He had to give up his seat for them. Li Shimin and the others also stood up to show their respect. These were all great scholars. They did not have to bow when they were in court, let alone when they were outside the palace. Naturally, they had to stand up to show their respect. Yu Shinan glanced at the people in the room, then looked at Zhang Feng and nodded. "No need to be so polite. Sit down." After that, he casually found a chair and sat down. The other 3 did not stand on ceremony and went to find their own seats. "Fengzi, what were you talking about just now?" Yu Shinan looked at Zhang Feng and stroked his beard. In fact, when Li Shimin and the others had just stepped into the academy, the 4 of them had already received the news. They had specially come to see what Li Shimin had to say, but they hadn't thought that they would still be a step too late. Thus, they had specially coughed twice to stop Li Shimin from continuing, because they were worried that the other party would instill some bad thoughts into Feng Zi's head. "Teacher, just now Lao Li came to find me and said that they received the latest news in Jiangnan. They came specifically to tell me." Zhang Feng looked at Yu Shinan with a respectful expression. "Oh." Yu Shinan smiled and looked at Li Shimin. "What news did Mr. Li receive?" Li Shimin smiled and said, "I received news that there have been more ships in Jiangnan recently. There are also more merchants coming and going." Hearing this, Zhang Feng was a little confused. He was about to ask when Ouyang Xiao beat him to it. "Is that so? Does Mr. Li know the reason?" Ouyang Xiao frowned and asked doubtfully. He did not doubt Li Shimin's words, because he knew that the ruler of a country would not lie over such a small matter. The saying that a ruler does not joke was not in vain. This was still in the palace, especially in front of him. Li Shimin looked troubled. "I don't know yet because there are not many of us there." Everyone shook their heads in disappointment. However, Zhang Feng did not think much of it. After all, it was not convenient to communicate at this time. He looked at Li Shimin and asked, Lao Li, is there any other news from Jiangnan? There is no other news for now. I will inform you as soon as there is news. Li Shimin was a little embarrassed. In fact, he wanted to find Zhang Feng to drink today. There was not much news. However, when he thought that he would meet these four old men, he was not in a good mood. It's okay. Just inform me if you have news next time. Chapter 1794. Zhang Feng waved his hand and didn't care too much. After all, there was still some time before they went to Jiangnan, and he also understood that Lao Li was being kind. Li Shimin nodded and didn't speak. Cheng Yaojin, who was behind Na Qingxiang, couldn't bear the loneliness and shouted, Now that you're done talking, can we drink? He came to the academy for one purpose, to drink. He didn't care about the things that everyone was talking about. He had waited for so long in vain, and he was already a little impatient. As his voice fell, everyone's eyes gathered on Cheng Yaojin. Zhang Feng was a little dissatisfied. He knew that this guy was brainless and only knew how to drink all day. But now that the four masters were here, how could he drink? Why did he speak so loudly? Yu Shinan and the others were a little disdainful. The Confucians had always thought of themselves as noble and virtuous, including the four of them. They were usually gentle and elegant, unlike this fool in front of them. However, he was still a duke, so they didn't say anything. Li Shimin was different. He was a little angry. Cheng Yaojin was brought up by him, but now he was standing in front of everyone and embarrassing himself? Wouldn't that be throwing his own face as well? He gloomily stared at Cheng Yaojin. Don't drink all day. Calm down. From his tone, one could hear that he was a little dissatisfied. Hearing this, Cheng Yaojin resentfully lowered his head. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say it. Everyone, sorry to disturb you today. We'll leave first. Li Shimin stood up, cupped his hands to the crowd, and was ready to leave. Originally, he wanted to have a good drink with Feng Zi after the four Confucian scholars left, but now it was all ruined by Cheng Yaojin. How could he stay? Would he be laughed at by the four scholars? He couldn't do anything to them. Lao Li, you just arrived. Sit for a while. Zhang Feng also stood up and said some polite words. No, I still have something to deal with at home. Li Shimin smiled and shook his head. Then, he cupped his hands and gestured to Yu Shinan and the others to leave. However, the latter was like an old monk in meditation. He nodded slightly and said nothing. Then I'll send you off. Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin and walked out of the door together. The two of them walked side by side, Cheng Yaojin following closely behind. After leaving the room, Li Shimin finally felt better. He looked at Zhang Feng and smiled. Feng Zi, you don't have much to do in the academy. Why don't we go out for a walk next time? Maybe next time. Zhang Feng replied casually. He still had a lot of things to do in the smithy, so how could he have the time to go out? Unknowingly, the three of them had already arrived at the field, where many students were playing. Teacher. Suddenly, a voice in front of them attracted their attention. Zhang Feng took a closer look and saw three students chatting in front of him. Their backs looked familiar, but he couldn't remember who they were. At this moment, Li Shimin joked. Feng Zi, there are quite a lot of teachers in your academy. Why do you always bump into them? Just now, he met four teachers in Feng Zi's room. He didn't expect to meet two more teachers as soon as he came out. He was a little curious. However, Zhang Feng didn't think so. He observed carefully just now and realized that the two figures were Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. When did these two become other people's teachers? Moreover, why were these two guys here? Shouldn't they be studying heat transfer equipment in the laboratory? He was a little puzzled, but more than that, he was angry. It was not because these two fellows were here, but because someone had called them teachers. One had to know that not just anyone could be a teacher. Like Master Ma, Master Zhang, and so on in the future, those fellows were all people with undeserved reputations. They used the name of imparting skills to make money. He did not wish for Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun to become such people. Ma Zhou, Hao Chujun. He shouted angrily to the front. Hearing this, the two suddenly turned around. They were a little happy because they came to report the results of the laboratory to Zhang Feng. However, they found that Zhang Feng's expression was a little strange. It seemed that he was a little angry. It seemed that he was angry with them. However, they didn't know what they did wrong. They could only timidly reply, "Hello, teacher." Zhang Feng coldly snorted, revealing his dissatisfaction. "How are you nice?" The two looked at each other and didn't know how to respond for a moment. Hao Chu-jun was a little smarter. He took a step forward and trembled a little. "Teacher, we don't know what we did wrong. Please enlighten us." "You don't know?" Zhang Feng's eyes narrowed and coldly snorted. "What did that student call you just now?" Hearing this, Ma Zhou and Hao Chu-jun let out a sigh of relief. They originally thought that they had made a big mistake that made their teachers so angry. It turned out that it was nothing. "Teacher, that student just now called us teacher." Ma Zhou cupped his hands and smiled. Obviously, he didn't realize the seriousness of the matter. "Teacher?" Zhang Feng coldly sneered. "Do you know what a teacher is?" The two lowered their heads and looked at each other. They frowned. Obviously, their teacher's words had a hidden meaning. They didn't dare to answer casually. They could only stammer, "We don't know. Please enlighten us, teacher." Chapter 1795. "All right, I'll explain it to you today." Zhang Feng glanced at the two of them and said solemnly, "As a teacher, you have to teach, and answer questions. As a teacher, you have to teach, and answer difficult questions. As the saying goes, a teacher for a day is a father for life. As a teacher, you have to love your students like you love your own children. Students also have to respect their teachers and treat them as their own fathers. Can you do this?" "We're terrified." The two of them lowered their heads and shivered. "Since you can't do it, don't let others call you teachers in the future. As teachers, you have to take the corresponding responsibility." Zhang Feng glanced at the two of them and reprimanded them. "Yes, teacher." The two of them still lowered their heads. Their expressions couldn't be seen clearly. Only their trembling bodies revealed the fear in their hearts. "Since you already know, you can leave." Zhang Feng's tone softened a little. In fact, he was quite satisfied with these two students. However, they didn't distinguish between the elders and the young. It seemed that they knew they were wrong, so there was no need to hold on to them. He let out a long breath and looked at Li Shiming and the others beside him. He found that the two of them had a dumbfounded look on their faces, as if they had seen something novel. "Lao, Olchen, what's wrong with you?" Zhang Feng waved his hand in front of the two of them, a little puzzled. After a while, the two of them reacted. Cheng Yaojin stared at Zhang Feng, his eyes flashing. "Feng Zi, how come I didn't know you were so good before? You're so good at teaching students. Go away." Zhang Feng glared at Cheng Yaojin in annoyance. His anger had not subsided yet, and this wretched genius was already causing trouble. "Olchen, don't make fun of Feng Zi." Li Shimin finally stood up. He looked at Zhang Feng seriously and said, "I think what Feng Zi said just now is right. As a teacher, you should act like one. If you can't bear the responsibility of a teacher, you will only lead the students astray. It's better not to have such a teacher." Zhang Feng smiled and nodded. "Lao Li, I didn't expect you to have such awareness. Not bad, not bad. Maybe one day you will become a respected teacher, ha." Li Shimin rolled his eyes at Zhang Feng in exasperation. No matter what, he was still the ruler of a country. How could he become so unbearable in the mouth of this brat? How could he have such awareness? Could it be that he didn't have it before? Of course, he could not say such words out loud. He did not care about Zhang Feng's teasing and continued, "Feng Zi, what you said just now was really good." "That sentence?" Zhang Feng asked subconsciously. He had said so much, so how could he know what the other party was referring to? "As a teacher, I preach and answer questions," Li Shimin said as he walked. Hearing this, Zhang Feng smiled slightly with a thought-provoking look on his face. Of course, this sentence was good. This was a selection of the works of Han Yu from the Tang dynasty. However, he did not say it out loud. Even if he said it out loud, no one would believe him. "Let's go, I'll send you out." He smiled and waved his hand to signal Li Shimin to go out. Cheng Yaojin was a little dissatisfied. "Are you in such a hurry to chase us away?" He still could not forget about drinking. Then you stay, we'll go drink. Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Qing Yaojin. He was not worried that the other party would stay, but with 4 teachers around, they would not be able to drink well. Forget it, we'll drink next time. Li Shimin hurriedly grabbed Qing Yaojin, afraid that the other party would make a fool of himself. Then he looked at Zhang Feng. Fengzi will go first. You don't have to send us off. After that, he pulled Qing Yaojin to the door. The latter glanced at him unwillingly. Zhang Feng smiled and turned to walk to his residence. Finally, after sending these 2 guys away, he could go back and have a good rest. However, what he did not expect was that when he returned to his residence, his 4 teachers were still in the room and had no intention of leaving. He had no choice but to go forward and salute. Greetings to the 4 teachers. No need to be so courteous. Come and sit. Chang'an stroked his beard with a kind smile on his face. Zhang Feng nodded and moved a chair to sit near the 4 of them. He was quite respectful to the 4 of them and would not step out of line in front of them. Fengzi, what do you think of Mr. Li and the others? Ouyang Xiu asked. Zhang Feng was startled. He originally thought that the 4 teachers might teach him some knowledge or how to be a good person. After all, he was about to go to Jiangnan. However, he never expected that they would ask about Lao Li and the others. Because he knew that the 4 teachers did not like Lao Li very much. Although they did not show it usually, it could be seen from some subtle expressions. Even though he knew this, he still replied seriously, Lao Li is an honest and reliable person. He is tactful and does things in an orderly manner. It's just that his servants are a bit like bandits. Zhang Feng smiled awkwardly, but he was telling the truth. Chang'an nodded. You're right. Mr. Li is indeed reliable. It's just that those servants... Chapter 1796. Speaking up to this point, he laughed. He directly ignored Li Shimin's other strengths, leaving only the fact that he was reliable. That's right, other than the emperor, there weren't many reliable people in the world. Fengzi, you should build a good relationship with Mr. Li. He's a businessman. When you go to Jiangnan, he might be able to help you. Chu Suoyang's face was serious. Although they didn't like Li Shimin, they had to acknowledge his status. Once Fengzi went to Jiangnan, his foundation would be unstable and he would definitely need help. Li Shimin was the best help. At the same time, this was the result of their discussion. Yes, teacher. Zhang Feng nodded, looking as if he had learned something. Fengzi, you can seek their help, but don't rely on them. Remember? Chang'an's eyes flashed. He didn't want Fengzi to get too close to them, but he could still help him. Zhang Feng frowned. He didn't understand. Seeing this, Xueji hurriedly added, Fengzi, they're businessmen. Everything is more than scheming. You have to get too close to them or you'll fall too deep. Moreover, you're the dean of White Deer College. You have to understand your status. Hearing this, Zhang Feng suddenly understood. So his 4 teachers were worried that he would be schemed against by them. Who was he to be schemed against by them? Moreover, what did his status have to do with anything? Although this was what he thought, he couldn't say anything that went against his teachers. This student will remember. Zhang Feng replied respectfully. Chang'an stroked his white beard, feeling satisfied. Good. You can rest. We'll leave first. With that, he stood up and walked out of the door. The other 3 glanced at Zhang Feng and followed closely behind. Since his teachers wanted to leave, Zhang Feng naturally couldn't sit still. He stood up and sent them to the door. He bowed. Take care, teacher. Only when he saw the 4 people's backs getting further and further away did he slowly get up and return to the room, half lying on the chair. To be honest, he really liked talking with his 4 teachers and the old scholar, because he felt that he could learn a lot of knowledge. It was just that the red tape was a bit cumbersome, and for a young man from the 21st century, it was simply torture. He lit the cigarette, took a deep drag, and slowly exhaled a cloud of smoke. He couldn't help but recall what his 4 teachers had said. He told him to look for Lao Li and the others for help, but not to get too close and not to rely on them. His teachers seemed to be afraid that Lao Li and the others would take advantage of him. Seeing his teacher's affectionate look, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of sadness on his face. That's right. Which master in the world wouldn't love and care for their disciples? Speaking of disciples, he thought of Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun whom he had just met. Did he reprimand the two of them a little too much? After all, the mouths belonged to others. They couldn't stop others from calling them whatever they wanted. Moreover, he had just reprimanded them in front of so many people. Would it embarrass the two of them in front of the other students? After all, people need to be thick-skinned. The two of them had a trace of innocence. Forget it, let's go and see the two of them. He took a deep drag of the cigarette, slowly sat up from the chair, and walked out of the door, ready to go to the laboratory to see Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. The laboratory wasn't far from the school. Zhang Feng walked leisurely while smoking, and soon arrived at the laboratory. At this time, a large group of people had gathered in a circle on the field. He didn't know what they were doing. It was class time now. Did these guys skip class? With this thought in mind, Zhang Feng strode towards the crowd and shouted, "What are you doing here? Why aren't you in class?" Hearing this, everyone turned around. When they saw Zhang Feng, their faces were filled with joy. This made Zhang Feng even angrier. Not only were these guys not in class, but they were also smiling when they saw him. They really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. "Speak, what are you doing here? Where are Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun?" Just as he finished speaking, two figures emerged from the crowd. It was Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. They hurried to greet him. They were a little flustered. It seemed that the matter just now was not over yet. "Master, please forgive us. We are researching the hot air balloon." They were a little uneasy. They were afraid that their master was still angry about what happened in the morning. Hearing this, Zhang Feng's gloomy face finally showed a smile. It turned out that he had wronged them. However, it seemed that they were unhappy about what happened in the morning. "I see. How is your research going?" He looked at the two of them and showed a warm smile. After all, he knew that he couldn't blame the two of them for what happened in the morning. Seeing Zhang Feng like this, the two of them finally showed a smile on their faces. Ma Zhou took a step forward, smiled, and cupped his hands. "Master, the hot air balloon is much better than last time. We are experimenting." "Really?" Zhang Feng was a little surprised. He didn't expect the two of them to improve so quickly. He was overjoyed. "Let's go. Take me to see it." Chapter 1797. The two of them looked at each other and were overjoyed. They quickly took the lead and led the way. "Teacher, this way please." The onlookers took the initiative to make way. What came into view was a roll of coarse cloth, iron wire, brazier, coal and so on. However, the experimental equipment this time was somewhat different from the previous experimental equipment. This made Zhang Feng a little surprised. He pointed at the experimental equipment in front of him and wondered, "Ma Zhou, Hao Chujun, why is the experimental equipment a little different this time?" "Teacher, we found that the iron wire is more stable than the hemp rope, and it is not easy to be broken by fire, so we made some changes. Also, the brazier has been increased in weight, and the coarse cloth has been increased in thickness." Ma Zhou cupped his hands and replied. Hearing this, Zhang Feng stepped forward and touched the coarse cloth to check. Sure enough, as Ma Zhou said, the experimental equipment had been changed. "Well, you can give it a try." He glanced at the crowd and signaled to start. Originally, he wanted them to improve the hot air balloon, so there should be some changes. There was no dissatisfaction in his heart. "Yes, teacher." Ma Zhou nodded. After he finished speaking, he called everyone to start preparing. "You guys hold up the coarse cloth. You guys go and strengthen the rope." After he finished speaking, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun personally went to start the fire. Usually, when Zhang Feng was here, they did the experiment by themselves. This was an important experimental equipment, so there was no room for any carelessness. The others busied themselves according to Ma Zhou's instructions. Zhang Feng took out a cigarette from his waist and went to Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun's side. He picked up a piece of coal that had just turned red and lit the cigarette. He took a deep breath and smiled. "You two brats, now you are a lot more sensible." It seemed that the reprimand in the morning had some effect. Otherwise, why would these two be so obedient? Why would they do everything by themselves? "Teacher, you must be joking. Student is not setting a good example for junior brothers." Ma Zhou scratched his head and showed a silly look. Zhang Feng smiled and did not speak. He knew that these two guys humbly accepted the reprimand in the morning. He was about to comfort them when there was a roar not far away. "Dean, everything is ready. Should we start the experiment now?" Zhang Feng slowly turned his head to take a look. Sure enough, the coarse cloth had been propped up, and even the iron wire had been fixed. Everyone was very familiar with the process, because Ma Zhou had led them to experiment once before. This was the second time, so the operation speed was very fast. "Okay, get the live pig over here and get ready to start." Zhang Feng stood up and glanced at the crowd. The experiment had to use live pigs, otherwise, the effect would not be achieved. "Yes, teacher." Ma Zhou cupped his hands and replied. After saying that, he led the two men to pull the live pig. Obviously, the live pig this time was much bigger than last time. It seemed that Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun had put in a lot of effort. The live pig was quickly subdued and tied to the ground. Then, they hung the live pig and the brazier up. The coarse cloth was propped up as they waited for the wind to blow. Zhang Feng put the cigarette in his mouth, looked up at the sky, and said to himself, "What can make the wind come?" "Teacher, a gust of wind blew before we prepared to do the experiment. I believe the next gust of wind will come soon." Ma Zhou put his hand in front of his forehead and looked like a monkey looking at the sea. He looked while answering Zhang Feng's question. "Yes, teacher. Now that the equipment has been set up, we can only wait." Hao Chujun narrowed his eyes. As he spoke, he intentionally or unintentionally glanced at the group of coolies behind him. These students were invited by Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. Last time, the two of them held the rope and it could be said that they were suffering, so this time, they thought of this method. It was a pity that these guys did not know the mystery. When they heard that they could participate in the Dean's flying experiment, each one was happier than the other. Now, they were holding the iron wire, and their hands were sore. Only they knew how uncomfortable it was. Finally, one of them could not stand it and said with a constipated face, "Dean, what wind is this? I can't stand it anymore." The person who spoke was Pai Ho, who was hung up on the tree last time. He did not see the spectacular sight of the hot air balloon with his own eyes last time. He was a little unwilling, so he followed. He did not expect the iron wire to be so heavy. Zhang Feng took out the cigarette in his hand and glanced back. "How would I know?" "Ask the person who dragged you here." He very naturally threw the question to the pot. He was really smart. He was secretly happy. It was not that he did not want to say it, but he was not a god. How could he control the air? Pai Ho saw that his questioning was fruitless, so he turned his gaze to Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. He looked troubled. "Seniors, we can't stand it anymore. Can you put it down first?" After saying that, Pai Ho prepared to put the iron wire in his hand on the ground. Seeing this, Hao Chujun's face changed. He hurriedly went up. "Don't, please don't. What if the wind picks up as soon as you put it down?" Now that he was in front of his teacher, he did not dare to mess things up. Pai Ho was a little embarrassed. Putting it down was not right, but not putting it down was not right either. "Then what do you think we should do? In any case, I can't lift it up. Come. Give me the iron wire. I'll hold it." Hao Chujun took the iron wire and prepared to take it. Chapter 1798. This made Pihu overjoyed. He quickly handed the iron wire to Hao Chujun and said with a smile, "Here you go." After saying that, he ran to the side to rest. Ma Zhou took a look and quickly replaced the other students. He was afraid that these guys would screw up the experiment. He would be more at ease if he did it himself. Zhang Feng saw all of this and could see that these two people were really concerned about the experiment. It seemed that the reprimand in the morning was indeed serious. He thought to himself, "I'll appease these two later." After a moment, a trace of coldness came from the dry sky. The surrounding leaves rustled and their clothes fluttered. "Teacher, the wind is blowing." Ma Zhou faced the cold wind and was as excited as a child. As soon as he said that, a gust of wind blew and the coarse cloth was lifted. Following the squeals of the live pig, the hot air balloon was blown into the sky. Everyone raised their heads and put their hands on their foreheads. They looked at the flying scene with joy. Zhang Feng was no exception. He held the cigarette in his mouth and half raised his head. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile. The hot air balloon was blown higher and higher, flying into the distance. They could only see the shadows on the ground and the dissatisfied sounds of the live pig. The hot air balloon has flown far away. Quickly chase after it or we won't be able to find it later. Zhang Feng took the cigarette that was about to burn out and threw it at his feet. He shouted at the stunned crowd. After saying that, he ran in the direction of the hot air balloon. Everyone looked at Zhang Feng's back and realized something. They quickly followed behind him. The hot air balloon was blown by the gust of wind as if it had an engine. It kept floating into the distance without any intention of falling. Zhang Feng led everyone to chase after it. He was afraid that he would fall behind. This thing had a brazier on it. If it fell in that flammable place, it would be a disaster. In addition, it was still winter and the weather was dry. If it touched a little fire, it would immediately catch fire. Therefore, he didn't dare to be careless. But then again, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujuan's improved hot air balloon was much better than the previous one. Last time, the wind was so strong that the hot air balloon fell after a while. This time, it was amazing. Not only did it not fall, it floated further and further away. Thinking of this, he turned around and glanced at the two of them. Suddenly, he felt that these two fellows were much more pleasing to the eye. "Teacher, what happened to the two of us?" Ma Zhou gasped and asked as he ran. "You two brats want me to chase a kite with you, and you're asking me what's wrong?" Zhang Feng took a deep breath and scolded jokingly. Hao Chujun awkwardly scratched his head. He could tell that his teacher was praising them and not scolding them. It was already not easy for the hot air balloon to become like this. Ma Zhou, on the other hand, was as dumb as a wooden fish. With a troubled expression, he asked, "Teacher, I'm sorry. Why don't you take a rest first and let us look for her?" "Rest my ass. Hurry up and find them. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the consequences if something happens." Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Ma Zhou, turned around, and continued to run forward. This disciple was good in every way. Sometimes he was just a little stubborn and couldn't think straight. At this moment, someone shouted, "Director, the hot air balloon has stopped in front." Hearing this, Zhang Feng stopped and glanced ahead. Sure enough, the hot air balloon had stopped at the edge of the field in front. "Everyone speed up. Hurry up." With that, he once again took a step forward and ran toward the hot air balloon. The people behind him also seemed to be full of energy and ran forward. Finally, the group of people reached the hot air balloon under unremitting efforts. Fortunately, the brazier had been extinguished, the coarse cloth did not have any traces of burning, and more importantly, the pig was still alive. However, it seemed to have suffered serious injuries as it lay on the ground and kept groaning. Seeing this, everyone's hanging hearts were also relieved. They formed a circle with their knees on their arms, panting heavily as they watched the brilliant results in front of them. After a while, seeing that they had rested enough, Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and said with a smile, "Everyone has worked hard this time. I'm very satisfied with the hot air balloon you made." Hearing this, everyone suddenly raised their heads and looked at Zhang Feng with surprise. They were all students and what they needed the most was the director's affirmation. Today, the director personally praised them. How could they not be happy? Especially Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun. They had just been reprimanded in the morning. To be honest, at that time, the two of them were still a little unhappy. After all, they were reprimanded in front of so many people. Who would want some face? But now, their teacher actually affirmed their work. This made the two of them feel like they had been reborn after a disaster. "Thank you, teacher, for your praise. We will work harder in the future." Hao Chujun looked at Zhang Feng and a trace of determination flashed in his eyes. Ma Zhou clenched his fists and was a little excited. "Not bad, teacher. This hot air balloon still has some flaws. We have made you accompany us for so long. Next time, we will definitely improve." As soon as his voice fell, Hao Chujun rolled his eyes and glared at him. This guy really has a one-track mind. We were clearly talking about happy things. Why did he bring up chasing hot air balloons? Is he not afraid of teacher's anger? Chapter 1799. Thinking of this, he secretly glanced at Zhang Feng. The latter had a calm expression as if nothing had happened. In fact, he had long been used to Ma Zhou's stubbornness. If he didn't care about it, there wouldn't be so much trouble. Zhang Feng glanced at the experimental equipment on the ground and said to Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun, "Find someone to transport the equipment back. I have something to say to you." Hearing this, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun's hearts skipped a beat. Was their teacher blaming them for what happened in the morning? But their teacher had already reprimanded them once. Their teacher wouldn't hold it against them. Was it because of the hot air balloon? Yes, it must be because of this. The two looked at each other and prepared to take the initiative to apologize to their teacher after everyone left and plead for leniency. That was the only thing they could do. The two sighed and glanced at the crowd. "You can go to class after transporting the equipment back." No one dared to say anything. They could only take the experimental equipment and walk in the direction of the classroom. Seeing that almost everyone had left, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun looked at each other and said tacitly, "Teacher, we know our mistake. Please punish us." Hearing this, Zhang Feng was instantly amused. He didn't intend to punish the two of them. Besides, they didn't do anything wrong. What were they talking about? Could it be that these two fellows had done something wrong again? Did they come here to ask for punishment? With doubts in his mind, he probed, "What did you do wrong? Tell me in detail." The two looked at each other and felt a little embarrassed. They really didn't know what they did wrong. They just guessed that their teacher blamed them for letting him chase the hot air balloon. Otherwise, why would their teacher leave them alone? To see the winter scenery? We shouldn't have let our teacher chase the hot air balloon. Please punish us. Ma Zhou lowered his head and voiced out his conjecture. Chase the hot air balloon? Zhang Feng smiled. So these two guys thought that he left them here because of this? Did they think he was too petty? He couldn't help but laugh. Do you think I left you here because of this? Isn't that the case? Ma Zhou was a little confused. Hao Chujun was the same. They originally had good thoughts, but now they were all overturned by their teacher. I'm not so petty as to punish you for such a small matter. Zhang Feng faintly smiled. Then master is? Hao Chujun asked respectfully. He didn't dare to make any wild guesses about this benefactor in front of him. Zhang Feng looked at the two of them with a serious expression. I asked you to stay behind because I want to tell you some things. Since he was going to impart knowledge, it was better to be serious. Hearing those words, the two of them shuddered. This was because they knew that being able to listen to their teacher's teachings was something that could only be encountered by chance. To be able to meet him today was simply a gift from the heavens. The two of them looked at each other and cupped their hands together. Teacher, please speak. This student will definitely listen with respectful attention. Zhang Feng did not speak immediately. Instead, he took out a cigarette from his waist. Naturally, he had to brew it for a while. When he put the cigarette in his mouth and was about to take out the lighter, the sharp-eyed Hao Chujun hurriedly took out the lighter from his waist and lit it. He handed it to Zhang Feng's mouth and said flatteringly, Here, teacher. He glanced at Hao Chujun and secretly thought that this child was sensible. He lit the cigarette with his mouth, took a deep breath and exhaled the smoke. Then he patted Hao Chujun's hand and motioned for him to take back the lighter. Hao Chujun was stunned. He didn't understand the meaning, but seeing that his teacher's cigarette had been lit, he put away the lighter and turned to return to his original position. At this moment, he saw Ma Zhou's resentful eyes. However, he chose to ignore it. The corner of his mouth even raised a trace of pride. He thought to himself, You want to fight with me with this little guy? Ahem. Zhang Feng deliberately coughed twice and straightened his face. He looked at the two of them and said, Let's start with the matter of someone calling you teacher this morning. Do you know why I reprimanded you? Hearing this, the two of them were a little nervous. They could see that their teacher attached great importance to this issue from the morning. However, they still made a mistake under their teacher's eyes. It was really a bit like being caught as a thief. And now, their teacher actually brought up this issue again. Suddenly, the two of them were a little overwhelmed. Teacher, this student doesn't know. Please enlighten me. Ma Zhou's face was a little ugly. Then I'll explain the reason to you one by one today. Zhang Feng took a deep breath and glanced at the two of them. Then he slowly said, In fact, I'm doing this for your own good. If you want to be someone's teacher, you must first have your own skills. Then you must know the wisdom of others. You must know your own wisdom. You must keep your words and act accordingly. You must have a virtue and set an example for your disciples. You must not hide anything from your disciples. You must not beat or scold them. You must not speak ill of them. You must be qualified. As his voice fell, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun looked at each other and couldn't help but blush. Chapter 1800. Both of them couldn't do what their teacher had said. Since they couldn't do it, how could they have the face to be someone else's teacher? Teacher, disciple is terrified. Ma Zhou lowered his head and his hands trembled. It was not because of what his teacher had said, but because he did not think that he was qualified to be someone else's teacher. Hao Chujun also lowered his head, looking like he was being taught a lesson. You don't have to be afraid. I'm just explaining some of the theories of being a teacher to you. After all, you'll be the teachers of others in the future. Zhang Feng smiled and comforted the two of them. Then, he continued, let me tell you about the standards of being a disciple. Seeing that Zhang Feng had no intention of blaming them, the two hurriedly cupped their hands and said, Yes, Master. Zhang Feng nodded and continued, as a disciple, the first thing you have to do is to obey the teaching tasks assigned by your master. You can't turn a deaf ear to your master's teaching, refuse at will, and be lazy. You have to listen carefully, learn actively, respect your teachers, love your fellow disciples, and serve your master when necessary. Yes, teacher. Disciple will definitely do as teacher says. The two of them said in unison. Since you can do it, I won't say anything more. Zhang Feng took a deep puff of his cigarette and glanced at the two of them. Next, I'll talk to you about the way to conduct yourself in the world. The way to conduct yourself in the world is to complement each other with kindness and tranquility. The ancient masters took things in silence, without any change in expression, so that others could not know what they were thinking. The utmost sincerity of the Tao was to be erudite, to interrogate, to think carefully, to distinguish, and to carry out. Humility of the heart, sincerity of the mind, humility of the body, lowliness of the voice, subtlety of the view, and farsightedness of the dream. This is the way of learning steadfastly. In the way of learning, one must be open-minded, meticulous, and subtle. There is nothing that one cannot learn to succeed. Doing a good deed will make one's fists submit to you and not lose it. Knowing something will make one's fists submit to you and not lose it. Getting love will make one's fists submit to you. The two of them were stunned and looked at each other. They were a little confused because they felt like they were in the clouds. Teacher, can you explain the meaning behind this? Hao Chujun scratched his head. He didn't quite understand, and so did Ma Zhou. Alright, I'll explain it to you. Zhang Feng nodded and said patiently, when dealing with people, you have to be firm and soft at the same time. You can't show off your courage or be timid. If you have righteousness in your heart, you will naturally be invincible. Since ancient times, the masters have always been quiet and expressionless, so that others don't know what they are thinking. The highest level of learning is to be erudite, to ask questions often, to think calmly, and to distinguish right from wrong. When you are with others, you have to be humble and sincere, lower your status, lower your voice, observe others' every move, and have big dreams. This is the way of learning. As soon as he finished speaking, Ma Zhou and Hao Chujun shuddered. This, his teacher's words, were simply words of wisdom. These words seemed to have enlightened the two of them, allowing them to see the light at once. Decades of knowledge seemed to gush out at this moment. They froze on the spot, carefully savoring these words. Zhang Feng looked at the two in a daze and was a little confused. He couldn't help but ask, Ma Zhou, Hao Chujun, are you all right? Hearing this, the two of them seemed to wake up from a dream and slowly looked at Zhang Feng. Teacher, what you just said was wise words. I was intoxicated for a moment and couldn't extricate myself. Please forgive me. Hao Chujun cupped his hands and his body was trembling. Yes, teacher. I was also intoxicated just now. Ma Zhou looked at Zhang Feng with admiration. His face was full of respect. Good. Since both of you have been enlightened, I didn't come in vain this time. Zhang Feng put his hands behind his back, looking like a master. Obviously, he was very satisfied with the reaction of the two. He was not bragging, but he really hoped that the two of them could become talents. Everything is almost done. Now I'll tell you about this hot air balloon. Seeing the two of them humbly asking for advice, Zhang Feng planned to explain the principle of the hot air balloon once. Thank you, teacher. We are all ears. The two of them said in unison. Zhang Feng nodded and said as he walked, the hot air balloon uses heated air or some airflow to affect it. You all know this, right? After that, he looked at the two behind him. Seeing Zhang Feng in front, the two of them followed and nodded. Not only that, there are many airflows in the sky that can cause the hot air balloon to float. In addition, the heating in the brazier below is constantly stirring the coarse cloth, causing the airflow in the middle to compress. This is the principle that controls the hot air balloon to float up and down. You can also understand it as thermal expansion and contraction. Zhang Feng said as he walked with his hands behind his back. Thermal expansion and contraction? Ma Zhou scratched his head and was puzzled. Teacher, what is thermal expansion and contraction? Zhang Feng stopped walking and glanced at the two of them. He earnestly said, thermal expansion and cold contraction mean that when an object is hot, it will expand and contract when it is cold. For example, this hot air balloon is made of coarse cloth. When it is hot, it will expand, and when it is cold, it will contract. Do you understand?